So, Mr. Chair, you are live.
Right on. Thank you very much, Clerk. So good afternoon, everybody. It's June 24th, 2021 at 1 p.m. It's the Transportation Standing Committee of Halifax Regional Municipality. I'm going to call this meeting to order. I'm your chair, Wei Mason. Let's buckle in and see if we can get this done in the, I believe we have up the allocation to 3 hours today. Let's start with a roll call. I see some of our members are here, some are not. I know we're going to be joined by some later. Has Councillor Kent joined us? Seeing none. I know Councillor Mancini sent his regrets for today. Councillor Stoddart, if you'd care to say hello.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair.
Hi, Councillor Stoddart. Great to have you here. Councillor Russell.
Good afternoon. Happy to be here, actually from Cape Breton today. It's a good day. Thank you.
Shut your filthy mouth. I mean, that's great for you. I'm so happy for you. Sorry. Deputy Mayor Outhead.
I'm here, but Cape Breton looks a lot like Sackville in that picture, Paul. I don't know. Listen, happy to be here. Hi, colleagues, and hi, staff.
First Lake is so good that we have just replicated it around the province.
I believe that's what the kids call a deep fake. Guest councillors who will be joining us later will be Councillor Austin and Councillor Blackburn. Others may join as they see fit. So thank you all for that. We're moving on to item 2, approval of minutes of April 29th, 2021. Someone like to move those minutes?
So moved.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Russell, seconded by Councillor Stoddart. Is there any further discussion on the minutes as presented?
No.
Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Carries unanimously. Next, we'll move to the approval of the order of business. Clerk, are there any additions to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, there are no additions to the agenda.
Excellent. Members, do you have any requested additions to this meeting? Seeing none, I'll ask for a mover and a seconder for the approval of the order of business as presented.
So moved.
So seconded.
Moved and seconded, Councillor Outhead, Deputy Mayor Outhead, and Councillor Russell. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We now have an order of business. We have no business arising out of the minutes. We have, would anyone like to declare a conflict of interest?
Yeah.
Seeing none, we'll move. There's no notices of reconsideration. There's no notices of rescission. There is no deferred business that has been brought forward by the clerks. Anybody have anything that they've deferred they want to bring forward? I don't think that's how it works. So we'll move on to notice of table matters none. That brings us to correspondence, petitions, and deletions, Madam Clerk.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have the committee has received correspondence, general correspondence, as well as correspondence for items 12.1.3, 12.1.4, and 12.2.1, which has been circulated to the committee.
Thank you. I have a question for the clerks. I had a resident say they've written a standing committee an email a couple of times about an issue and have not gotten a acknowledgement of receipt. And I'm wondering if that could be our practice, that either we send an email from the clerk's office or from the chair of the committee so they at least know we got it, because the person was concerned that it hadn't even gotten in, and I checked and it was in general correspondence. So I just like that noted. Perhaps you could talk to the clerk of council about that.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll move on to 10.2 petitions. I'll ask the clerk first if there are any petitions.
Mr. Chair, the clerk's office has not received any petitions.
Thank you. Do members of the committee have any petitions? Chatty Cathy's today. So we have no presentations today for 10.3. There are no information items brought forward for 11, which brings us to 12 reports, 12.1 staff, and 12.11 case 22257 regional plan review themes and directions presentation. You'll be pleased to know Kate Green is joining us. I think some of you may have seen her before, heard from her, and we're going to focus on transportation in the regional plan today. So take it away, Kate Green.
Thank you. Thanks for having us here again, and I will share my screen now. Am I sharing the right screen? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you again for having us here. And my name is Kate Green. I'm the Regional Policy Program Manager. Some of you have seen this presentation before, so we'll go through it relatively quickly, but just make sure we touch on some of the key points for members of the public that may be watching. So this is our team. I'm here representing a great group of people today. I know enough to be dangerous, as Brad English says, but we're all here to support you today if you have questions on the regional plan and the work we're doing. A lot of people across the organization have contributed. This is just acknowledgement of the work of many people behind the scenes and our steering committee. So we like to make sure that everyone is aware of how many different groups within the organization and external to the organization the regional plan touches. So we're going to be chatting today about why we're here at Transportation Standing Committee, how we're engaging with the public, what the themes and directions are, and we'll focus in on growth and mobility, as Chair indicated. We are reviewing the theme and directions report, which is our first big deliverable of the regional plan. We're in the middle of our engagement period. It's a little over a month, and we've hosted some webinars. We're talking with lots of people. Our comment period will close on July 16th. So we're encouraging people to provide us with comments, and committees also with written comments as they see fit, to let us know if we're heading in the right direction. The regional plan is a strategic document. It's the first planning document we adopted after amalgamation that provided a region-wide vision for land use. It was first adopted in 2006, and it really outlined how growth and development should take place until 2031. It's quite a powerful document in guiding what we do. As a high-level policy document, it sets the vision for what we do at the community or secondary plan level, and it sort of helps to direct our bylaws and sets our region-wide policy intent. And if a matter is important enough that a rule should apply everywhere, the regional plan can set it up so that a rule is created consistently across all our bylaws. So an example of that is our environmental regulations and watercourse setbacks. Those policies, the direction for it sits at the regional plan, and we've sort of jumped through and made a change, a same change across all the bylaws, identifying the setback required from watercourses. The plan also identifies our intent to conduct future research programs. So for example, our transportation priorities plans were all identified in the regional plan and eventually became the integrated mobility plan, which you're very familiar with. And we also identify programming or partnership opportunities. So the work we do at a regional level isn't always just internally focused. It's focused on our partnerships across community, sometimes with other communities, and with the provincial and other levels of government. So certainly we set out our intention on how we work in partnership. And this is our timeline. So we're in the middle of our second review, and we're hoping to have a draft document back to Council in 2022. And we will be engaging the public using virtual tools and really relying on community networks. So we've been trying to get the word out over the past number of weeks, and thank you for your support and pushing it out through your networks. And you know, we're making the rounds. You've seen us at a few different committees. We're going to advisory boards as well, and we're about to move into meeting with stakeholders and more internal staff teams. Our web page is our primary point for engagement. You can see it there. Here's a little look at it. And you can see over on the left, our overall comment period has been running since May 20th. We've got a survey open. We're doing another push right now around the survey, trying to get more responses to that survey, but we've had over 400 residents participate in that, and we're hoping to get more. So that is running from June 3rd to July 16th. And we've already hosted some virtual presentations on key topic areas, one of which was mobility. So the theme and direction report focuses on the key planning issues and ideas that we're going to be working on over the review. It's our chance to ask everyone, here's what we think we need to do. Are we going in the right direction? And for everyone to give us feedback, which will help us focus and guide our work. There are 11 themes that we've broken up our theme and direction document into. They're listed here. I won't get into all of them today, but we're going to focus in today on transportation and land use. And we recognize that those two ideas, the idea of transportation and the idea of land use and how we implement our work, they're inseparable, and the decision-making processes for them need to be integrated. So the key question we ask at a regional scale is, how do we locate housing and employment in smart locations so that growth can happen easily and in a way that furthers the municipality's most important goals? So some of our goals are things like our mode share targets or how we want to encourage pedestrian orientation. We have a lot of goals we're focused on at a regional level. And we think about first how we're growing. So what's our projected demand for housing and employment over the horizon of the plan and into the future? And we're relying on two key pieces of information: our housing and population analysis, which Committee of the Whole received a presentation on, and also industrial employment land analysis, which we completed with our partners in real estate over the past year. That's available on our website for anyone interested in digging into it. And then the second question we ask is, where should we grow? So as we know how much we're going to grow, or just have a general sense, test some scenarios about how growth might happen, we begin to assess where new housing and jobs can be accommodated. So it's not just about where there's a piece of land, but also how it relates to services and infrastructure. So we think about how and where we can infill, or where we should expand the city into greenfield areas. All of that's done with careful consideration as to how development can be serviced with water, sewer, transit, recreation. And we study whether or not we should preserve or protect important pieces of ecological or cultural land. And again, we look at our targets, like our mode share targets and our emissions reduction targets as established in the Integrated Mobility Plan in Halifax. And we can also study how different land use scenarios impacted the models developed for those projects to see what the impacts are on those targets over time. Here's just a little bit of an overview of our targets. I won't get into this too much, only to say that the first regional plan set up that 75% of growth should be inside the service boundary, with 25% in rural communities. And since that time, we've refined that idea. New documents have suggested that as much as 90% of growth should be contained inside our urban communities, or a suburban and rural center, our regional center, sorry, and with only 10% in rural communities. So we're testing those ideas as part of this review, studying how growth should occur and where the most intense growth should happen. You can see over on the right of the screen how many new residential units have come online and where they've come online between 2014 and 2020. So 31% in the regional center, 54% in suburban communities, and 15% in rural. The Integrated Mobility Plan is a key document that's guiding our work, and we sit at the table with the IMP team and trust in Tanya Davis's leadership in implementing that document across the organization. And we are really thinking a lot about how land use relates to mobility. So the IMP represents, as you know, a significant shift in how we approach the movement of people rather than just vehicles, and that's at the heart of the plan. And our work on the regional plan review is instrumental in making sure that region-wide mobility policies are consistent with the plan. So we'll update the whole chapter, the transportation and mobility chapter in the regional plan, to reflect the actions in the IMP, and we'll set intent for future work that needs to happen as we try to implement that ambitious plan. Here are some of the actions that are coming out of that work. So one of them is functional plans for multimodal corridors, and some roads across the region have been identified as these strategic multimodal corridors, which are important for moving people and goods, be it by vehicle transit or active transportation. And They've been identified in the Moving Forward Together plan, the Active Transportation Priorities Plan, and the Integrated Mobility Plan, and they were further refined in the Rapid Transit Strategy. So what we want to do is update the regional plan policy to identify these strategic multimodal corridors that connect communities, and will include policy direction to guide future functional planning and direct land use along the corridors so that it supports mobility objectives. We also want to set up study of land acquisition tools. So there's no shortage of work needing to be done around land acquisition in order to make these corridors functional. So that will help us in preserving and acquiring right-of-way lands for investments in the corridors. We really need to develop a strategy around that, so we're quite focused on that. And then, of course, we are implementing the Rapid Transit Strategy. Wonderful announcement about work going into a ferry running from Mill Cove. So that's an exciting announcement. We heard, was it this week or last week? My days are running together, but exciting announcement. And we're aiming to build a rapid transit network by 2030. So, you know, it will direct investment in high quality transit service and infrastructure. It's key to how we're thinking about intensification. And it really connects not just the idea of, you know, people should live along these lines, but they're well connected into key employment nodes within the municipality. So that's an important part of helping to create a good network that crosses the core of the urban areas. And of course, the 3 ferry routes are contained in that. And a lot of our work in suburban communities in particular will be focused on making sure our work is aligned to that strategy. And we looked at the walk sheds, anything within 800 meters of these rapid transit lines, and tested how much intensification could happen in these areas. We looked at sort of age of buildings, lot size, and sort of assessed those corridors. And we took the center plan typology and extended it outwards as a first step in trying to study how much intensification we could fit in these corridors and whether or not it would be enough to actually support the rapid transit network. And we did see that we could make that work. And now we're working with council to try and articulate a vision for those areas and what council ultimately would, and community would like those areas to look like, and how we would like those suburban areas to change over time. That's an important part of our visioning work that we're doing over this review, and that will ultimately feed into our suburban planning process. The other thing that came up when we worked on the rapid transit strategy, and as we've been speaking along the way, is that we've been focused on the long range plan for our transportation network. So we know there's momentous technological and social changes coming from virtual work to autonomous vehicles. All of that will change how we move and how we go about our daily lives. So we need to think about the long-term implications of these. We also need to think about how Halifax fits into the region. We're an important center, so I've been saying we need to think about at least the hour around Halifax and how we connect to that and grow over time as we relate to those other places. So we've been talking about this regional transportation planning strategy and the need to set that up in this regional plan to begin that visioning process. Sort of beyond 2031. And the other thing that we're very focused on is accessibility. The regional plan has an important role to play in our work and making HRM a city for people of all abilities, ages, and backgrounds. And there's a lot of work to be done. Our planning and development regulations really address a wide range of physical accessibility issues, including access to buildings, the design of the buildings themselves, how our streets and sidewalks are organized, the location of barrier-free parking, signage, wayfinding. So this strategic planning that we do in the regional plan can also support the idea of how we create accessible AT routes, active transportation routes, accessible taxi services, and accessible transit. And even going so far as the regional plan will also focus in on how we run our engagement activities in an accessible way, and partner with community to learn from others' firsthand experiences. So we'll be reviewing all our planning documents through the regional plan and identifying how we create a barrier-free and safe journey for everyone. And we're working with Melissa Myers, and we'll be speaking a lot with the Integrated Mobility team about this and trying to come up with ways that we can address this through the policy, as well as implement our accessibility strategy, of course. So last, our landing slide. Here is our website, www.shapeyourcityhalifax.ca/regional-plan. Our email address is regionalplan@halifax.ca. And our phone number is 902-233-2501. And we would love to hear from all people about the regional plan and the work we're doing. And those are the best ways to get in touch with our team and speak with staff directly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Oh, need echo there. Any sound a little Darth Vader-y right now? Is that just me, or is it sounding that way to you too?
It
Oh, I
sounded
love
that
it.
way to all of us.
Oh, that's great. Just a coincidence, I'm sure. Are there any questions from members of the committee? I have one. So this morning, the Halifax Index was presented to a small group of folks and online at the convention center. And one of the things that was interesting was seeing that the rural single-family homes, single occupancies, were just that's where that's happening. It's not happening in suburban right now. Which, to my mind, I was sitting there thinking, of course, given the constraints and the conditions and the delays around Sandy Lake and Port Wallace and the extraordinary increase in demand, which was highlighted over and over again in the index. But it creates some interesting challenges. So my questions are, do we see that being able to change that a bit, because what I was seeing is, yes, multis are happening in the core, but we're losing the race in terms of our goals, perhaps even overall, if we're aiming for 10% because of that shift. So, and then the other piece was, how far is the regional plan going to be able to go in terms of talking about transportation solutions in rural? And specifically, what was interesting is they used a different kind of topology than we've used in the past in the Halifax Index, and they talked about the inner rural suburbs, and they had it mapped out. And I'm wondering if that's something that we've been considering for both transportation and for planning purposes.
Thank you for your questions. I did attend the presentation this morning, so I'm glad I did. I had similar reactions. We know that there have been some shifts in how people live. Certainly not just us, but as the pandemic has happened, our counterparts, rural communities, towns across Nova Scotia are experiencing growth that they wouldn't have been anticipating. So people may be changing how they want to live. And I think we will need to track that over the next number of months and years as we understand how COVID and really changes in how we work might affect how people choose to live. And, planning is just all about creating a vision for the type of community we want to create. So certainly we're not saying we don't want people to live in rural areas by any stretch of the imagination. We're just trying to balance how we invest in services relative to where we place density. So I think there's still opportunity for rural areas to change and shift and for people to live there. But we have to kind of understand what that means if our population continues to increase at the rate it's increasing. So that's something we're paying attention to, and I don't have any more of an answer than that, but we're all picking up on that.
I don't think correlation is causation here either. I think that are people choosing rural because they wanted to choose rural, or are they choosing rural because we have unexpectedly blown through the supply in suburban and we're still struggling to get more supply on, and what will happen when that supply exists? So, there's no way to know until years have passed, I guess. Deputy Mayor has a question as well. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Kate. The focus of this, of course, this committee is transportation, Kate, and you did customize your presentation, which I've seen a few times now and always learn a little something, so thank you.
I think you froze, Tim.
Seems like it here.
He looks very learned, though. He froze.
does.
Usually I freeze with my mouth open. Let's give him another second to see if he comes back. I feel like he was really leading up to a good question, so I'm trying to stretch it out in his behalf. But you know, we all know the internet's very spotty in Bedford, right? Tim, going once, going twice. All right, if we could ask the clerks to reach out to Councillor Audit and see if he'll be able to rejoin us. He may not, because he was waiting for the windows and doors to arrive that are being delivered today. And he didn't get to, he was just about to ask a question, wasn't he? So there was no piece in there for you to answer, Kate, I don't think. All right, anybody got anything else? Anybody want to throw in a sacrificial question so that maybe Tim has a chance to reconnect?
Absolutely. We have seen a number of different maps that talk about the urban and suburban areas. And Kate, I don't know if this falls under your purview or not. For tax purposes, communities like Lower Sackville, we are taxed under the urban tax rate. And I'm just wondering if we have all of the maps aligned as far as the borders of the urban and suburban and rural designations.
Thank you for your question. Through the chair, we are in the process of adjusting some of the boundaries, the planning boundaries. So we focus primarily on the planning boundaries. So I'd say the way the regional plan is set up today, it's more focused on piped water and wastewater, and we're trying to shift that boundary to the transit service boundary. So where we consider sort of the edge of urban and suburban and what is the beginning of rural communities. I think I would say council is in the middle of a pretty active conversation around what's the right level of servicing for rural communities, and also how do we invest in infrastructure and maybe rural centers. How do we need to think differently about communities that are along the edge, like Fall River or Tantallon? Are they a little different because they have a higher population density than maybe the further flung rural areas? So I can say the rural paper is really setting up, trying to have that conversation about how we define rural areas and how that relates to infrastructure investment.
Okay, and I appreciate that. I'm not sure that identifies where the differences are between the different maps and the designations.
Yeah, we are not as focused on tax policy, so but there's definitely a focus on how services align. Okay,
I'm wondering if that could be a takeaway, and I'm just considering that for myself and for the other councillors. If it could be a takeaway to see if we can do something about alignment of the urban, suburban, and rural boundaries. Thank you. And I see Councillor Outfit has returned.
Good job stretching there, Councillor Russell, making that question up for Councillor Deputy Mayor. I will say also part of this could go to the legibility and understandability of the regional plan. Is we may want to start referring to them as the urban tax boundary and the urban planning boundary or something like that. We tend to use the same phrase, and it's only contextual that it means different things. But Deputy Mayor, welcome back.
The challenge is that when we are talking about an urban community, some people have certain expectations of what an urban community is or what a suburban community is, and if we have different lines depending on what the different designations are, if there would be different services provided, different densities, different nearly everything. So yes, the question was, at the last minute, just to give Councillor Outfit time to rejoin, but it is something that has been a concern of mine for a little while. Thank you.
I see Kate not rushing to add to that, so we'll move to Deputy Mayor. Deputy Mayor, welcome back.
Sorry, folks, we lost internet here completely. I don't know what happened. I'm home in Bedford and have fiber up, and I don't know what's going on. So anyways, Kate, you've heard me say this before, but I am worried. We've had a lot of growth out in the suburban areas, and you know that I am a big believer in what I've been through in West Bedford and whatnot, that we have got to get transit in there sooner. We have got to get be it turning lanes, roundabouts, whatever, in there sooner. The CCCs help pay for them, of course, but we still are not keeping up with the growth. And when it comes to our infrastructure, we'll talk about transportation infrastructure now. I could also talk about parks and recreation infrastructure, but that's a different meeting. But it's going to take us till 2030 to bring in rapid transit, as we know it, and yet we're going to see growth going in, and we want growth, but my big worry remains that we're just not prepared for it. People are moving here and saying, well, isn't this nice? It's a safe, beautiful community, but and I'm paying high taxes, but holy smokes, I'm spending as long commuting, or when is this road going to come, or when is this park going to come, or when is this transit route going to come, this sort of thing. So I'm hoping that this is going to provide us with an opportunity to really make sure that the regional plan and the integrated mobility plan and the rapid transit plan and whatnot really work together. The days of saying, trust us, buy your house now, build your house now, well, within 5, 10, 20 years, you'll be able to get to and from work in a nice, efficient manner. And we can't continue to do that. And Wei, you've articulated that many times about your concerns about the Bedford Highway Functional Plan needing to move sooner, the Herring Cove Plan road sooner, etc. So I'm reinforcing that. I also have concerns that are we really going to, with the regional plan, get into where we're going to allow growth? We know, for example, that the Bedford Highway is not going to grow. We know it's not going to have true BRT. So are we going to cut back a little bit on where we want our density? What are we going to do in Sunnyside, for example, because of the floodplain changes, the new data on that? Are we really going to get into, yes, we want growth. Yes, we're going to be under pressure to have growth, and growth is good, but I'm worried that are we really going to make the decisions, the tough decisions we need on where do we really want the growth and how are we going to get to and from there? Because we're going to be under pressure to grow, and grow is good. We know that. It's good for the economy, good for society, culture, you name it. But bad growth isn't. And we've all lived and visited in cities where growth has not been good. I'm worried that because of the demands and the shortage that we're going to start slipping back into bad growth if we don't give this regional plan some real teeth.
Thank you for that. Do you want me to? I can address a few things.
You can agree with me, or you can tell me
you
I'm
will.
wrong.
I don't know if you want me to say anything, but I can
Perhaps you could
respond.
leave it with, I agree, those are great points.
Those are great comments.
Okay.
Yes.
That's
I
fine.
would add one thing. Certainly, I think we share the same concerns about growth. And you've heard me say, we've been planning for growth on an incremental basis. And I think we need to take a slightly larger frame, think about what it looks like if we can actually get to 1 million and work backwards around what places are going to intensify the most and how we need to invest. And think about that, not just us, but also Halifax Water, the libraries, school boards. So I think we need to look at that collectively, as well as the province and our partners to support major infrastructure like Highway 102. So there's work to be done there just to create that lens. And I think that will help in directing strategic investment in the way you're speaking to. We also are thinking that we can use the regional plan to direct growth in a meaningful way. So the thing we've been talking about is identifying densities for corridors, potential densities for the corridors that we would like to intensify. So that's a way of council suggesting what level of intensification is appropriate in what areas, and being clearer about that in the regional plan than we have been before. Also, maybe removing centers from the places we don't expect a lot of growth to go, like Sunnyside, for example.
Yeah, that's my big word. Okay, well, thank you, Kate, and I'll continue on this. And I'm just wanted this to be part of the record because, I want growth. We all want growth, but it's got to be smart, good growth that we prepare for. And frankly, some of this growth and can help us pay for this infrastructure too.
Good points,
Thank
Deputy
you,
Mayor.
thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair.
So Thank you. I see no one else to speak. We have a pretty full agenda, so I'm going to move us along unless Iona. Oh, no, I see your hand, Iona. Councillor Stoddard. Oh, you're muted, Councillor Stoddard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like the thoughts, Kate, of improving transportation in suburbs. District 12 is growing in leaps and bounds, and I look at our ridership. Our all-day ridership is 3,129 riders, and it's second only to Spryfield at 3,186. And I'm just thinking, for two urban districts, we do have a lot of commuters. And in the AM, I looked at District 12, we have 652, where District 12 is ahead of us, having 996. So I think the all-day numbers are pretty close to Spryfield, and they're, like I said, number one for rider. I'm just wondering if you look at those numbers and how they're increasing, and there's possibility that anything's going to be done up there. I know it's suburban, but they're growing as well.
Ms. Green.
Sure, through the chair to the councillor. Through the regional plan review, we will study the urban transit service boundary, which affects suburban communities. So it includes basically the suburban areas in the regional center, the urban transit boundary. So what we'll do is we'll look at densities and make sure that that boundary is in the right place. So that is one thing we will do. I think the other thing we're focused on right now is implementing the Moving Forward Together plan, as well as the rapid transit strategy. So we're trying to realize those operational strategies. But with the regional plan review, we'll set up for the longer term plan for regional transportation and what comes next, and how we build on that work that's been done, and also evaluate what needs to change based on where things are growing. So what I would probably do with your question is take it back to Patricia Hughes and her group, and we would sit down and look at the numbers and how that relates to those existing plans, and look at the growth that's happening and how densities might be changing, and talk about how that will fit into our work going forward. So I can take that question away where it is detailed and talking about actual ridership, and we can regroup with you on that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much for those answers. I don't see anybody else in the speakers list. And so I'll let you get about your busy day with you and your team. Thank you all for coming. And we'll move on to 12.1.2. So 12.1.2 is the amendments to the administrative order number 12 respecting the appointment of the traffic authority, and deputy traffic authorities. So I'm going to start by talking about what the purpose of today's discussion is. The purpose of today's discussion is to consider the CAO's recommended nominee for the position of traffic authority of the Halifax Regional Municipality, and to make a recommendation to Regional Council to accept or reject that nomination. The traffic authority is a position created by statute. On the advice of the CAO and subject to policy, the Halifax Regional Council appoints statutory positions who are empowered by legislation to make decisions on issues within their purview. Council does not have a supervisory role over decisions that fall within the purview of the traffic authority, and cannot usurp the power of the traffic authority. Under the Motor Vehicle Act, the traffic authority is given extensive responsibility for the regulation of traffic within municipal streets. The definition of traffic in the MVA includes pedestrians, vehicles, and other conveyances, either singly or together, while using any street for the purpose of travel. So members today should restrict themselves to questions and comments related directly to the approach the nominee would take to exercising the statutory powers of the traffic authority. The purpose of the discussion is to ensure that the nominee's vision aligns with that of Regional Council. Discussion of other matters, including questions of a personal nature or of past employment, should be avoided and will result in a reminder, and then could be ruled out of order. Today's Transportation Standing Committee may recommend to Regional Council that they approve the nominated candidate or reject the nominated candidates, and request the CAO nominate one or more additional individuals for consideration. So that's what we're about today. And I read that whole thing because it's the first time we've ever done it. And so, it's all brand new to all of us today. So we're going to start with, because it's his nominee, I'm going to ask the CAO Jacques Dubé to speak briefly and make his nomination or bring forward his nominations. Thank you. Jacques.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. It's certainly, I think you've gone over it quite well in terms of why we're here, so I won't get into that. But at the end of the day, we have a process where, TSC has to recommend to council, and I'm required to recommend one or more candidates to the TSC. So, the traffic authority is required by law to administer and enforce provisions and regulations of the Nova Scotia Motor Vehicle Act on behalf of HRM. So, I would say that it's always an honor and privilege to serve regional council as your CAO, but it's also my privilege and honor to recommend that the Executive Director of Transportation and Public Works, Brad Anguish, who's a professional engineer, be appointed as traffic authority, with Tasso Kouchoulakis, and who's also a professional engineer, and Roddy McIntyre, PN, continue to fill the deputy traffic authority roles. So we have a traffic authority under normal circumstances. We have a traffic authority, and we have two deputy traffic authorities who can act in the absence of the traffic authority and support the work of the traffic services team. So, Brad Anguish is certified as a professional engineer and has a diploma in engineering sciences from CEGEP Saint-Jean in Quebec and an engineering degree from Royal Military College in Kingston, Ontario, and has a master's in business administration from St. Mary's University. He has 34 years of experience leading a diverse array of projects such as infrastructure construction, engineering design, information systems and technology, business process improvement, and strategic performance management. Mr. Chair, he has served the residents of HRM for the past 18 years in the role of director or executive director, managing several major portfolios ranging to $250 million annually, including environmental management services, the Harbor Solutions Project, highly successful, business planning, chief information officer, community and recreation services, parks and recreation, and of course, since October 2018, I appointed Brad as Executive Director of Transportation and Public Works, and since then has been responsible for delivery of solid waste resources, project planning and design to support delivery of the road and active transportation capital programs, operation and maintenance of HRM's transportation system, including parking services, and more recently, the management of Cogswell redevelopment project. So he's executive sponsor of that particular project, reporting through to me as CAO. So given his depth of skills and experience, his vast experience, both inside and outside of HRM, his executive position, and appointment that he's also the chief engineer of the city. He's my appointee as chief engineer. And he's also a board member for the Transportation Association of Canada. So for all those reasons, Brad is uniquely positioned to be an effective, very effective leader in the role of traffic authority, working with councillors, HRM, and provincial stakeholders to implement regional council's vision for road safety, including achievement of Towards Zero goals, as well as our integrated mobility plan objectives. We'll give you a little sense of what has been happening under his leadership. Traffic services has seen increased staff. He's added three more staff pre-built to that division. He's improved equipment, signage in terms of sign and paint trucks. Under his leadership, the road safety budget was increased from $1.25 million to $3.04 million. He also very capably chairs our multidisciplinary road safety steering committee, which is an important group across the organization, including external stakeholders. Some of his other key achievements he has led with his team are increased traffic calming. He increased traffic calm streets by 677% since he took over that responsibility, from 13 to 101. He increased ped ramps with tactiles by 229%. He went from 250 to 823. And he's also an innovator and not hesitant to pilot all kinds of different ideas. Some of the pilot projects are 40-kilometer-an-hour neighborhoods. There are 14 now complete under his leadership. He has completed already 25 leading pedestrian intervals. You know, they've applied fluorescent reflective strips, basic and side mounted crosswalk signs, and was very instrumental in our tactical urbanism support in COVID, and has also, led the charge on advanced yield lines, to name but a few of the more innovative and piloted things that we've been trying out as an organization. So Brad can provide you with much more detail in terms of traffic services outputs under his leadership. You know, I would close by saying he's a very strong leader with HRM. He's a trusted colleague, and I strongly recommend his appointment as traffic authority. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. So we do have Tim on the speakers list, Deputy Mayor, but there is also, if the committee wishes, and we weren't frankly sure if you did or not, Brad apparently has prepared a short PowerPoint presentation. What is your wish?
I'd prefer to ask questions rather than to have to sell himself necessarily, but that's just my opinion.
That's fair. I mean, that's why we're asking, because we weren't sure how it would go.
I mean, others may disagree with me, but I think we all have some knowledge of Brad. I'd be happy to ask him questions, see how he responds rather than have him present. But if others would rather hear him present, that's fine as well.
Hearing no
If he
contrary.
really wants to sell himself, that's up to him.
Does anybody want to take the contrary position to that? Seeing none, then we will go to the deputy mayor and ask him to put the motion on the floor and start the debate. If required, we can do committee of the whole rules, I think, for this, but that will require a motion. So to start, we're under regular rules of 5 and 3 minutes, and we'll go to deputy mayor.
All right, I'm happy to move that the Transportation Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council adopt amendments to Administrative Order Order 12, respecting the appointment of the Traffic Authority as set out in Attachment 2 of this report, to appoint Brad Anguish, PNG, as the Traffic Authority. So move.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Moved by deputy mayor, seconded by Councillor Kent. The floor is yours, deputy mayor.
Well, that's the nice part, Brad. Now I get down into the nasty stuff. But no, listen, Brad, we just heard some very nice things from Jacques, all of which I have suspected he would say, and many of them I've experienced. And with you, not only you, and I do believe you are an innovator, and I do believe you take calls, you jump in the car, you go look at things. We've had long debates about many things when you were in parks and then in transportation. And I've also had great experiences with Tasso and Roddy, and we've driven a lot of analysts right out of HRM, sending them to work with me in Bedford. But they have always been very professional, responsive, and even when we didn't completely agree on something, I always had great expectations or explanations, I should say, that I was able to share with my residents. Just to put you on the spot a little bit on this situation, you are coming in at an interesting time, and I do believe you are an innovator, and I do believe the Jacques' comments that you have and will make changes. We are heading into a time where it's the #1 issue that many of us receive in our districts is to do with traffic. And it may be speeding, it may be speed calming, it may be speed limits, it may be parking, you name it. So it's something that, of course, people have to understand that under the statutes of Nova Scotia that we have you're independent, and you would be independent, and that. But I would like to question you a little bit on a couple of things. One is we have policies now that we are very proud of: the integrated mobility plan, complete streets, safe streets, these things. There are going to be times when those policies, those visions, are going to be a little bit ahead, if you will, of the warrants that the TAC or you as an engineer might want to use. And so that's the first thing. And dovetailing with that is the new developments, and where I think we need to be more proactive. So you may do a study, and we may be 50 cars or 50 people a day short, or it may be a new development and nobody living there yet, but we know there should be no parking there. We know there should be a crosswalk there. We know there's going to be a stop sign required there at some point. We know there's going to be traffic lights required there at some point. Where are you going to draw that line, or help us draw that line between we want to make this safe, we want to live up to our expectations, we want to prevent injuries and deaths before they happen, but if we did it the old way where we waited till the warrants would say, oh boy, it's time to put a stop sign there, or oh boy, it's time to put a red light there, people could get injured or killed in the meantime. How are you going to balance that vision of our policies and our vision with the with the traditional warrants that have been used.
Wow, thanks, Counselor. It's like you've done this before. And yes, I'm nervous, panel. So this is new to me. But thank you for this opportunity. I'd like to thank Jacques for the introduction, very kind introduction. It's a great question. Look, I think the best way to answer this question is in the 2 years I've been with TPW, just over 2 years, we ran up a number of, my team with council, and the key word here, with council, we've initiated 21 projects, 21 projects net new since I came aboard with TPW. I want to be very clear. It's not me. I happen to be a leader of a team who understands where council wants to go. Council's done the heavy lifting. You've approved the policies that are advanced. We know, because I can tell you within TAC, the kind of recognition that Halifax now receives as being highly progressive. And to be very clear, no different than it was in the days of the environment, whether it would have been the second generation landfill or Harbor Solutions. We're very blessed to have council as a lead here. And that makes the job so much easier. So to drill into your question, look, I think the policies and the vision of council is always going to lead. And if we wait for the paperwork to always catch up, we're going to be falling behind. So, and we're seeing this as we grow rapidly. So I'm hoping what you've seen to date is a concentration on flexibility. And furthermore, speaking to how I will approach the job, you saw and you heard in the overview, the charter is very specific about the areas of the responsibility for the authority. I want to be very clear that it is my position to be as narrow focused on that as possible. In other words, meaning that I'm not looking to stretch the edges of those authority. I'm trying to actually minimize the execution of that authority and maximize the flexibility of council. We are unique in Nova Scotia with the traffic authority. In some cases, it makes us quite fast. We just heard from Hamilton the other day how they wish they had a traffic authority. However, very clear that if that is not managed carefully, it can create a lot of frustration, resentment, and quite frankly, not enjoyable life for either councillor or staff. So the first thing I want to say is, it's going to be X, and we're going to really carefully examine each thing and whether the authority, traffic authority, has to actually make a decision. So what does that do? That pushes more things, I think you'll find, to recommendations of staff. One of the challenges with the job is that while on one hand, we have this traffic authority responsibility, it crosses over with our duty and responsibility as traffic engineers and engineers as whole. And quite frankly, it's the engineering side of the house where the majority of the business is done and where the majority of the flexibility actually resides. And I find the two get crossed up a lot. So quite frankly, the warrant system will, in all likelihood, follow the leadership of council and where we want to go, and the decisions of the engineer. We'll refresh them more frequently. Obviously, not knowing whether I'd be the authority or not, I have not spent a lot of time looking at warrants. This is advice that I received from my staff, the current traffic authority. So I think the easiest thing to say is the warrants will follow in terms of timing. However, that doesn't mean we won't do what we need to do to exercise safety. And we're dialed in on the road safety goal. Council made a very clear decision that's super helpful to staff. We have an achievable goal. It's towards zero, a 20% reduction in fatal and injury related collisions. We're on fire to achieve that goal. We want to get there as soon as possible. And that's very helpful. So safety is really the name of the game. We're trying not to let the authority pieces get in the way of doing what's right, doing what's progressive, and getting the job done. So hopefully you get a sense of how we'll deal with that.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We'll move to Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My apologies to everyone for being a little late. I was able to be able to listen to some of the presentation prior to this, so I was able to do that from my phone. So I'm very happy to second this motion. I want to thank Jacques for your your role in this. It's a vitally important one in your leadership role, and it's not an easy position when you have the oversight of so many staff and so probably a number of applications and such. But thank you for bringing Brad to this table. Brad, you and I first met back many years ago when you were with wastewater and the projects that were important to Woodside Eastern Passage, and you were impressive then, and I continue to see that has only improved since the last time. I agree with what the Deputy Mayor has already spoken to around your actions, your leadership, your results are evident in and I think very visual and easy to see across the municipality. On that, excuse me, I think actually you kind of answered the question that I have, but I'm going to throw it out there and maybe expand on it just a little. And it is around street safety and speeding issues and what we are here. I had a great conversation this morning with the East Division commanders and the chief in HRP on this. And it's no surprise to you or anyone else at the table that it's a huge priority for me and a concern. There's a lot of contributing factors to why people are speeding on our streets, and there's a limited amount of things that we can do here within the municipality. But of course, the traffic authority has a huge role in that, as does TPW around traffic calming measures and such. So where this is taking me is that when we first got to council, one of the first things in the new year in 2021 that we had to adopt was a document that identified council priorities. And there was a debate in council at that time around street safety, around addressing speeding and people feeling safe in their communities. And it is not an identified item, but since then, there's been a lot of energy, and you spoke to it again today, that it's clear to you that that is a council priority, yet we don't have it there. So my question originally was going to be, how important is this issue to your mandate? But I think you have answered that. So I guess what I want to know is there within your mandate and your leadership an area where we can more concretely identify that priority? I know we can't go back. We may not be able to go back and revisit that document. I don't know. I'm still learning some of the nuances of all of our visions and strategies. And we do certainly have some really great pieces that when combined together give, I think, us the tools to make a difference. So can you speak a little bit more to your understanding of what you could see as work that can be done in the future that allows me to understand where you as a leader, what do you see in some opportunities ahead that can be in the area of addressing street safety and speeding and such?
Okay. Thank you very much. In a nutshell, I think I understand exactly where you are. I know it's not written in the express words in the strategy. I guess to give you some comfort, the importance of that strategic priorities document is that it really helps us and council as a staff talk to each other about what's most important. So that and where resources go. The fact that it's not there in the way that would make you feel comfortable, I guess my answer to you is I don't see it as a problem at this time. In other words, as our team has come forward in trying to address your needs, so far, council has responded not only favorably, but have pushed us even farther in terms of resources. Resources are the number one thing to do the job. And the one thing that, and Councillor Mason knows this because he's been pushing me hard. He's been daring me, right? And council's been daring me. What I will do is give you my word that at the end of the day, I work for the CAO, and the CAO knows that I will be respectful, yet I will be very straightforward. If there's more resources required faster, obviously I work within the context of all the priorities, but at this point, we're probably moving as fast as one could expect without being irresponsible or out wasting money or out having money sit on the sidelines that we can't implement, because that's no good, because that's obviously means that's other priorities that are not getting funding that could. And so, and I'd want to move ahead in a responsible kind of way. That said, with the challenge laid out before us and the growth curve we appear to be on, as you just heard through the regional plan, the need to stay abreast of this and not create a deficit, either in the infrastructure front, which is my engineer hat on, or in the traffic control front, is very important, because we can't fall critically behind that curve. What I just heard from Kate Green was kind of interesting, because your vision is planted in the integrated mobility plan and in the road safety strategy. And if you heard Kate, it's very aggressive. And so what that means is if we are following those policies and that direction, that means we're pushing the edge of basically the planning environment and everything else that goes with it, which is where I believe council wants to be on this issue in order to make this the safest city while, basically responsible growth. So I think that's my best answer to, if I thought I had a strategic issue or I could not get the attention of my colleagues in bringing people together to get the job done, the first person that's going to hear about it is the CAO, and I know he will help me as he has to date. And then also I'll just bring light to the Road Safety Steering Committee. You've heard me talk about the province owning more than half the roads in this municipality. The province is a huge piece of this. I have seen promise that that they are starting to understand the magnitude of impact they have in your communities in terms of creating a safe community. The police can't cover all that territory, and my team have no authority within it. So it's very critical. The 50% of this we have to motivate through the province with your help, through advocacy. I truly believe we're starting to make a difference there. We have had some very high profile speed reductions that could not have been done without the advocacy of council, the support of the community, backed up by the traffic authority, the engineer saying this needs to be done. And so if I have a concern strategically, it's more about the province being able to keep up with HRM. That one, again, I will continue to keep council advised, work with Jacques and his relationships at the province as well as mine to make sure that they are keeping abreast of us as we grow rapidly within the province. So long-winded answer to hopefully address your concerns in the short term. So I am, in a nutshell, I'm not concerned about the lack of that definition in the execution of my duties right now.
Okay, thank you. I've never known you not to be direct and to the point, but I've always known you, and I think to what your first comments were to Deputy Mayor was minimize execution, maximize flexibility council. I remember very distinctly that you were very, very to the point on all the issues that we were facing up there in Woodside, but you were absolutely super open to some flexibility to get resolution. So, okay, thank you for that response. I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Owen made the joke about the province trying to keep up with us. Are you
Yeah.
still talking about traffic? We can move on to Councillor Russell has added himself to the list. Councillor Russell.
Thank you very much. Brad, I agree with and appreciate a lot of what you've said. One of the things that you said that I don't necessarily agree with is that resources are the number one thing. we have an extra $1 million in the budget this year for traffic calming. And one of the streets that is being addressed is Riverside Drive in Lower Sackville. It's a 9-meter wide street. Tim, I see you twice in the meeting again. You must have frozen again. It's a 9-meter wide street that is very, very straight. It is known as a raceway in Lower Sackville. One of the streets in Councillor Blackburn's district is 2 or 3 years old. It's a 9-meter wide street and is very straight and needs traffic calming desperately. So we have designed streets that are straight and wide well in the past, and we are continuing to do it. Adding more resources, I don't think will fix that problem. Adding traffic calming after we already have a raceway, I don't think will fix the problem. What we need to do when we're looking at new streets is make them not raceways. We need to do something. And I'm wondering what your approach would be on a go-forward basis about how we can resolve that from a TPW perspective.
A great question.
If I may, before we go into that may be moving out of a traffic authority thing into a TPW discussion, right?
Yeah.
That, you know, like as I said in the preface,
if the departments were siloed, yes, you're right.
no, but we're here today talking about the traffic authority, not TPW. Like that was what the preamble was. So how about we just see if we can have an answer that relates that to the authority, the traffic authority, and then we'll see if that satisfies. If you think that's possible, there, Mr. English.
Is that possible? I'm not sure it is. I'll give you the quick. The answer is embedding the principles in the IMP into the Red Book. The Red Book is going to be delivered by P&D to you. I might even be Tuesday. I haven't checked the agenda. So the answer is to get ahead of the development curve. However, to your point about street design, the fact of the matter is our planning regimen and engineering designs of the past still have to be dealt with. And so, unfortunately, we are faced with taking engineering steps, safe engineering steps to rectify the situation until a more modern design can be put in place. And as you know, that is a very expensive proposition, street by street. We've discussed that at council, and quite frankly, that does come back to resources. So, thank you. That's.
I guess to try and help clarify, I think how the traffic authority would relate to this, if I may, Councillor Russell, I would also ask, does the traffic authority and the municipal engineer, since you're that as well, have the flexibility to do variances and to allow changes from what the Red Book says right now? You know, hopefully the Red Book, you know, we've been talking about it for years. I can't wait to see it on Tuesday, but are you able to provide relief as the traffic authority should a developer come forward through planning and development and say, I don't want to build that 12-meter road?
Yeah, so right now, yeah, I want to be careful how direct I answer. I think the quick answer is yes, there's probably qualification on that. Obviously, planning and development has to balance things based on whatever situation the application comes in under. But in a nutshell, yes, and we have established a robust variance committee to deal with these things to ensure that we are pressing the edge. And as I said, as I pointed out in Cogswell, you know, where we're the developer, we've gone out purposely and set the example. It will be amongst the narrowest lanes, if not the narrowest lanes in HRM, fully designed to modern standards and with the thought of speed reduction in mind. Thank you.
Councillor Russell, do you have a supplementary question since I kind of jumped all over your stuff?
No, I believe what I was looking for has been answered. Thank you.
We do the best we can with what we got here. So I'm Councillor Stoddard. I don't think, oh, we have, you're on the list, so you go next, and then we'll go to Councillor Kent.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brad. As a new counselor, I really appreciate you and your staff because you're so kind and accommodating and patient. Just wondering if this would be in your realm of questions and answers. Has there been any progress with getting the province to turn over a reduction in the speed limits to HRM?
Muted.
Deep sigh, deep sigh. Progress, there's a lot of talk. I would not classify it as progress as of yet. We have had discussions that there may be a move, and again, may be a move afoot to delegate the responsibility to HRM to establish our own 40-kilometer-hour neighborhoods. Of course, the even quicker solution is a default speed limit of 40 kilometers an hour in residential areas. Haven't had an update as yet, but council will be the first to know. Look, I'll just be upfront. We continue to advocate for that. This current process is too slow, too cumbersome, too expensive. We're getting to the goal. I can tell you that speed reduction, as you already know, is the #1 way, and no matter which practitioner I speak to across the country and in the US, speed reduction is the #1 way to create safety. So we continue to impress this, and we'll continue to strive. Anything you can do with your MLAs to impress that desire would also be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brad.
We'll go to, well, I haven't spoken yet. And I also noticed you've got people who aren't on the committee who are here who can speak at any time if they'd like, but they haven't indicated. But we'll go to you, Councillor Kent, for your second go around and see if anybody else pops up there.
Thank you. I think that this is probably going to be an easy answer for you, Brad, but it's sort of following up on Councillor Russell's point. And I guess I'll frame it differently in that as a leader and as the representative, the nominee for the traffic authority, and in that position, with your extensive experience that you have with TPW, with your extensive experience that you have on with already built relationships with other department managers who also play a role into the street calming and the addressing speeding, would you be, and again, I feel almost silly asking this, but is it safe to say that you draw on all that experience and push that ability to influence, or at least bring up these options, which would be, for instance, influencing or conversations with planning and development to understand and be fully aware of the impacts of how we build streets and what we approve as streets that may not be conducive to what you are under the traffic authority doing. So I'll leave it there. But before I do, Councillor Russell, I just want you to know that I've discovered very, very quickly with Portland Hills Boulevard, if you've ever gone up and down that windy road that you would think would not be a speedway, that people will find anything to speed on, straight or the windy path. They just make that into Indy 500, really. So thanks. Sorry. Okay, Brad, if you could answer that question.
Look, it's a great question, and it's honestly why I feel I do have unique qualifications to try to help. And that is, yes, Kelly and I, if Kelly was here, she would tell you, we have very frequent and I'm not sure heated is the word, but we challenge each other to get the job done. Obviously, I think Councillor Russell laid it out well. If we continue to develop incorrectly, we're just spending more and more time cleaning up. That is not lost on Kelly nor her team. And yeah, so, one of the parts of the job I enjoy the most is working with my colleagues, pressing hard. And again, we're limited in all the things we're limited in how much we can do at once, but absolutely, working with the chief of police throughout my career, Seems to, I don't know why, but I've had to do it for the 18 years I've been here. It's always rewarding as being ex-military, working with the police. And it's always been a respectful relationship. So no, I look, the wealth of experience that I bring to this job is one of the pieces I love the most, and I make sure it comes forth no matter what portfolio I'm in. Traffic Authority will be no different. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kent. So, Deputy Mayor, do you want to close, and I'll go now?
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Since you moved it. All right. So, Brad, thank you so much for being here. First of all, I want to thank you. You said you were nervous, and I don't think the public watching understands. We've never, I was going to joke and say interrogated, but it feels cruel. Question the nominee for this position in this way. This is a new policy, and I think today is a really good day for HRM, and I think that we should be talking about different ways to provide more information. This is the if you will, the most we're going to do for any statutory appointment. But I think this does set a bar, and we have to consider this or additional processes, not this, for all of them. And I'll be talking at council about that sometime in the coming months. My specific questions for you. So thank you for being here, and I really appreciate you being the guinea pig, as it were. The questions for you are, I have three, and I'll get right to them. Are one, and I'm trying to have actual things that have been issues with traffic authorities of the past. Are, one of the things that drives the community to distraction and makes councillors upset is when we're trying to establish whether a crosswalk should go across this particularly busy street. The argument is often, well, no one crosses there. And it seems self-defeating, right? Because, people can't cross when you have a river of 11,000, 12,000 cars going by at peak. And so there's no way to measure that. How are you as a traffic authority going to determine those desire lines and follow those kind of rules like they talk about in the TAC workshops, but especially in NACDO, where you're looking at where the destinations and where the population's coming from rather than current patterns? So that's one question. The second question is kind of more technical. I just covered up the window. I noted in the staff report, and I didn't have time this week to go back and look at the MVA, that it says that the staff report that established this policy for nominations said that one of the authorities of the traffic authority is fixing the maximum rate of speed, section 101 to 105. And I'm wondering whether or not, what I couldn't find in the regulations and having a quick look is, why is the province still overseeing that? And will they be overseeing that in the Traffic Safety Act? Are they continue to have a paternalistic thing where the handful of staff up there are overseeing our massive staff of traffic analysts and traffic authorities down here? Because it seems that is an authority of the traffic authority, responsibility of the traffic authority, and I'm not quite sure why we can't post 40-kilometer speed limits in all the residential zones, as you acknowledged is what we need to do. And then the final question is kind of more of a vision piece. Is I agree. I think with as long as council continues to give you the money that we did this year for traffic calming, I think we can achieve that the initial Vision Zero goal handily and possibly inside of the 5-year window that we'd said. What do you imagine could be next? Because we want to continue to work toward that. And I want to acknowledge, whenever we say we're not aiming immediately for zero fatalities, Sweden's been doing this 15 years and they've managed to cut them by 80%, but then it's stalled because there's limits to what you can do. There are limits to what you can do with engineering. But what would our next steps be to get that next 20%? Do you have any kind of ideas about that? And I feel like I am putting you on the spot the most with that one, because that's a real moonshot kind of question there. But those are my three questions, and then I'll look forward to hearing your answers, and I'll turn it over to you to close, Councillor or Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. And I do appreciate the comment about, relationships with past traffic authorities and kind of one of the secondary pieces that I would like to achieve out of this is to change that relationship with council because I think, quite frankly, whether we know it or not, we've achieved a lot already in a very short period of time, and it excites me. That's getting stuff done, as I say, is what makes the job all worthwhile. And quite frankly, it's throughout my 18 years, I've learned the things I'm good at and not good at. Getting stuff done, I'm good at, right? And as a result, my team, and we walk the talk. And so on that aspect, in terms of the crosswalk, look, without having done the job or been in the job, but being around the job, what I can tell you about the characteristics of me, and I think the deputy mayor said it, my number one piece is I got to get on site and see it. So if anytime there's a disagreement and with a councillor or a group of citizens, I'm going to do everything I can to get on site, get my eyes on it, be surrounded by the professionals involved, and walk and talk it through. Desire lines, I love it. TAC language, you saw us use this with the province in the Porters Lake situation. We absolutely pointed out to them the desire line situation we have there. So very familiar with that. And, it's hard without getting to each situation as to exactly what we would do. What I can assure you is eyes will be on it. There'll be plain language, clear language discussions. And as I said, if the traffic authority has an authority piece there, it'll be applied and it will be explained very clearly, but wherever possible, we'll be creating flexibility. What I do say though, is that, I want this time to be very solution focused. So for instance, the YMCA in Southwest had approached us. They wanted a crosswalk, but we couldn't do the crosswalk. Didn't make sense. And it wasn't going, to use the word warrants, it wasn't warranted. But at the end of the day, it also wouldn't have been an appropriate measure. However, we didn't stop there. We went in there and said, yes, there is a problem and we do need a fix. And we found a fix. And I actually got word back from Southwest that they were happy with, and so are the clients. That's the kind of attitude that we want to put in place here. So, like I say, hard to give me a direct answer on that question, but that's my approach. In terms of the paternalism, wow. I've heard every reason why they want to hang on to the 50 and below game. Obviously, we have some latitude above 50, and we've been exercising it. We have taken a number of routes that are quote unquote the raceways you've described, because in some of these areas, we don't have the ability to put in traffic calming measures, at least in the current form. And we've been working on speed reductions. The most latest was the piece that runs from Main Street right through to Main Street Dartmouth right through to East Preston. Very, very pleased to see what's happening there. Traffic authority knocked down the speed limit, and actually the behavior come with the police enforcement. We've seen a huge improvement coming through Cherrybrook, and hopefully that results in a big reduction at Ross Road incidents as well. So I don't have a quick answer as to why we keep pressing that. We feel that obviously we have a set of professionals who are as good, if not better than the province. I'll put that out there, and we can handle this if they'll just give us the helm. We also, though, I think our involvement in TAC is very important. I think it's not well understood. The province relies heavily on TAC. And so we have made it a point of being at the Transportation Association of Canada in very invested forums to work side by side with them to make sure that Halifax is getting the kind of aggressive and progressive solutions enabled here. Finally, vision. Actually, I think next steps. Well, look, a visionary perhaps is not my strong suit, being an engineer. However, I appreciate the words innovator and implementer is what I believe in. And I must say it was a very good day when council gave us the green light to move forward with red light camera and photo enforcement. I'm very short-term focused with my teams. We set, because turnover and retirements are so high these years, I should set very short-term goals, 3 years, 5 years, to make sure that everybody can see where we want to be and get the stuff done. The biggest piece for me right now, given that, we've heard the police resource issue and their inability to, that's not a criticism, but they just can't get the size of traffic departments that I think we'd all would appreciate. But the photo enforcement and red light cameras, I think, as we look through some of the incidents that we're seeing, and certainly with distraction being a big deal, certainly what we understand from other jurisdictions is that we'll see a sharp improvement in that with photo enforcement and with red light cameras. So to get the support of council on that, we are, we've already met more meetings on Monday. The RFP is ready to roll out the door. If we're talking about big moves, I would suggest you that's the next big move. Thank you.
Having family in Edmonton and experienced the red light cams and speed cams, I absolutely agree with that. All right, we'll move to Deputy Mayor to close. Looks like he's frozen again. He's looking so studious, but it's because he's not there. Okay, I'm going to give it a count of 3, and then we're just going to move to the vote. We still have quorum, don't we? 3 out of 6, yep. And Iona, I think, is still here as well. Yep. All right. 3, 2, 1. Would someone care to call the question? Question's been
What a
called.
shame he's going to miss it, though.
I know, but what are you going to do, right?
I know.
Welcome to the future. It's a lot harder to freeze and disappear when we're actually back in chambers after a second shot in a month and a half. All right. Question's been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The recommendation for regional council passes unanimously. I'd like to thank everybody for participating in that. It goes to show what a nerd I am. I was going to say in that historic process. Thank you.
Brad, I think
Jacques,
you're more visionary than you think. You've had such a positive influence on the municipality because you're instinctive and you do push. And even your comment about you 2 years and 5 years, that's looking forward. So don't cut yourself short on that one.
And yeah, I agree. All right, so we've consumed an hour and a half of our 2 or possibly 3 hours. Let's move on to the next thing. Thank you very much, Mr. Angrich, for that. 12.1.3 proposed bylaw for parking and immobilization on private property. Who'd like to? We have a staff presentation on this. Let's go to that first, and then we'll have someone put the motion on the floor. So we've been joined by Victoria Horn. Let's let her rip.
Sorry about that. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of committee. Please bear with me here a moment. Kate seemed to do this so seamlessly, and I never can. Clerk's office, are you able to share the presentation? My apologies. I don't see my presentation as an option despite having it open.
Yes, Victoria, we will begin sharing your presentation shortly.
Thank you.
I think while we're waiting for that to come up, Deputy Mayor, you need to get one of those clocks with the cat eyes going back and forth or something behind you, because I think he's frozen again. We need some kind of constant proof of life in the background.
Or he could join by phone.
Yeah, I think he'd better. I think he's frozen again. All right, here we go.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the Transportation Standing Committee. I'm Victoria Horn, and I'm the Director of Parking Services. I'm joined here today by my colleagues, Steve Brookman and Meg McDougall, to provide an overview of the proposed bylaw for parking and immobilization on private property. Next slide, please. The next 2 slides have your origin. So we have previously come back to Transportation Standing Committee and to Council, first on the legality of booting and vehicle immobilization. From those meetings, we were then directed in February of 2020 to bring back this bylaw, which we have brought to you here today. Next slide, please. This is your recommendation in front of you today. It is recommended that the Transportation Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council adopt bylaw V200, the Vehicle Immobilization Bylaw, as set out in attachment A to this report. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to spend the next couple of slides going over the key highlights of the bylaw as it's laid out in the report as well. So the first section of the bylaw and the first section of the motion talks about licensing. So the report contemplates 3 options for licensing of vehicle immobilization companies. The option highlighted is what is currently in the draft bylaw, and the option that staff feels best addresses the intent of the motion while avoiding the unnecessary need to license the industry and impose admin fees. Next slide, please. There is a significant part of the bylaw that covers what the experience will be like for the customer when they visit a lot. So the bylaw covers signage. Unfortunately, we were unable to follow directly the motion in creating a uniform signage standard due to conflicting land use bylaws. So the bylaw just simply indicates that the signs must comply with the land use bylaw of the area where the lot is located. The bylaw states that signs must conform with the applicable, or sorry, they must be clearly visible and legible at all times. They must contain a warning that the vehicles will be immobilized at the owner's expense and have the associated fees posted for the boot. Staff also proposed uniforms identifying the business, photo identification cards, and that vehicles be clearly identified with company information per the motion. Next slide, please. The bylaw requires multiple payment options per the motion, and that an attendant would arrive on scene to remove the immobilization device within 30 minutes. Based on the average of the jurisdictional scans, staff propose a release fee of $60 as being reasonable. However, it should be noted that industry has expressed extreme concern with this amount and has indicated that this will have grave impacts to their operating models. Next slide, please. Other considerations discussed in the report, there are several important considerations in adopting this bylaw. The addition to the creation of the bylaw before you today, the motion asks staff to look at the Ottawa model, which essentially deputizes private lot owners, which is what we've actually suggested in our bylaw, but allows for lot owners to share in the profits of the tickets issued. This option only applies to companies that issue more than 2,400 tickets in a 12-month period. This is a higher volume than the average issued here in Halifax on private lots. There's also administrative components to rolling out such a program that would require increased resources at HRM. Staff, therefore, are not recommending that option at this time. The report also outlines that this bylaw could have significant impact on a particular niche business here in HRM. I have heard from One Shop Parking and Target Park on this matter, and both companies have expressed their concerns via correspondence today. Finally, I wish to impact the existing standards for parking services. While staff indicate that the proposed bylaw can be enforced by existing parking services staff, we have different service standards than that of private companies. Our current service standard is to reply to an illegally parked vehicle on private property within 24 hours. Enforcement of this bylaw would be conducted in a reactionary approach as opposed to proactive. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions or comments from members of committee.
Thank you very much, Ms. Horn. Before we get started, who wants to go first? So, Councillor Ken, I'm going to go to you and ask you to put the motion on the floor. But I do want to say, just for clarity and for the record, that the 2 of the enforcement companies did ask to be presenters today prior to this, but I determined as chair that it would be more appropriate for us to debate and possibly recommend to council that they have a public hearing on the bylaw, because if we did that, then people who are in favor of having a bylaw wouldn't know we were doing that, wouldn't have an opportunity to speak today. My understanding is that those businesses are speaking in the public participation part after we've debated this. But again, our recommendation is to regional council rather than making the final decision today. So I felt it was appropriate to give the public a chance to speak as well. So I just wanted that for the record. I don't want to feel greasy to anybody that I made some decisions and it wasn't written down. So we'll go to Councillor Kent, Deputy Chair, and if you could put the motion on the floor and then we'll have a debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the Transportation Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council adopt bylaw B200, the vehicle immobilization bylaw as set out in attachment A of the staff report dated May 28th, 2021. So moved.
Seconded,
By
Councillor
Councillor
Russell.
Kent, seconded by Councillor Russell. Councillor Kent.
Yes, thank you. I'm still trying to kind of wrap my head around this move. I'm happy to support it based on a couple of questions, really. My questions are around oversight. So we have independent businesses getting a license, working within what we see as regulatory requirements. Who's overseeing and watching that? What are the ways that we can address that if they're out of sight, if they're exercising something beyond either where they should or in a biased way? For instance, parking, in my experience, is a very emotional deal for a lot of people. People get pretty uptight with, one, if they get called out on their illegal parking. They get frustrated, of course, if they get tickets. The worst kinds of things that I get from constituents are people who feel that a ticketer, whoever's issuing either a boot in this situation, a ticket or whatever, is acting, is overzealous perhaps, and perhaps without recalling all the sort of context of them, a chip on their shoulder of authority. And this happens. And so what would a mechanism be to deal with that? Would that be a complaint to the business? And what if the business is saying, you know, we've got great people out there doing that, but we're not, that have further complaints? And the second part to my question is, how, depending on who you say it is, how would that be resourced, financially resourced for the department? Where would the oversight, what would the oversight impact be for financial obligations from within the municipal? Because I'm assuming there's a municipal oversight. They can't just be licenses issued without some form of oversight on it. So those are my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kent. Ms. Horn.
Mr. Chair, through you to the councillor. Thank you, councillor. So we're actually not proposing a license component with the current bylaw as it's written. That is an option that was contemplated in the motion. Staff instead recommended that we take a well-established system that is already there and available to us, which is that any persons or business that are issuing these clamping devices under this new bylaw would need to register with HRM and with the province as a special constable. So there's already an established process for that. It's a vetting process. They have to provide their ID. We do a search against their background, and that is done every year. So there's opportunity to review their behavior against that. So that's one component associated with it. And then what we propose associated with this bylaw, as I mentioned in my speaking notes, is that it would be taken on from an administration component by parking services. So our group would respond as they do now. If there are complaints from residents, they can call 311 rather. And if they feel that any section of this proposed bylaw has been violated, we would then respond and conduct an investigation through our compliance officer ones and their supervisory team, as we do for any other violation for a bylaw. So if this bylaw is passed by regional council, we then do what's called a request to the province to establish a summary offense category for a new bylaw, and they'll come back with a fine amount associated with a violation within the bylaw, and then we would issue a summary offense ticket to the offending business.
Okay, thank you. That is making more sense to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kent. We'll now move to Councillor Blackburn. Oh, you want to wait till the end? You can go now, Councillor Blackburn. We don't stand on that ceremony here.
Oh, okay. No, I just didn't want to cut in line in front of official Transportation Standing Committee members. So thank you so much, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to ask my questions. Just two quick questions. I'm wondering if, does Ms. Horn know if
dealing with vehicle booting is something that is anticipated to be. Second question is,
Okay, so let's
my
take
apologies, I
a
missed the
let's
first
take a
part of
pause
the.
there, Councillor Blackburn. And because your audio cut out, so we literally heard
Sorry.
the setup of the first question, then we heard you say, and my second question is, so we missed the question entirely.
Sorry, just wondering if vehicle booting is something that they anticipate, or staff anticipates will be dealt with the new Motor Vehicle Act. And second is there a proposal for a standardized sign that will be in place at all lots that that employ vehicle booting? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Ms. Horn.
Mr. Chair, through you to the councillor. So there is a section of the proposed Transportation Safety Act that does explicitly deal with vehicle immobilization and vehicle immobilization activities. Staff at HRM has reviewed that. We have provided feedback. My understanding is the province is still doing public consultation on those sections. So we look forward to the next round of public consultation when we get to see the updated version based on feedback. And then your second question about standardized signs. So it will be standardized in the sense that all signs will have to clearly state that their booting activity happens on the lot, that vehicle parkers are at risk of having their vehicle immobilized or towed. They also will have to have a number posted that is available 24/7, that a real person can be on the other line to be reached. And it will have to have the fine amount as outlined in the bylaw. The one sticky feature about that is that we are still governed by the other land use bylaws. So the signs themselves in terms of size and placement may vary because we have to abide by, or the business owner would have to apply by applicable land use bylaws. But the contents themselves would be consistent.
So is there anything in place that would guide the lot owners? Like I'm just trying to think. We're going to say we must have all of this information on the sign and it must be clear, but there's nothing in place that says the writing on the sign is font 11 where it's hardly visible. I'm just wondering if it can be a little more clear and direct than just, it must be clearly written.
Mr. Chair, through you to the councillor. So should this bylaw be passed, we would provide guidance via our website. So I anticipate that we would create an entire section related to both supporting businesses in the establishment and in getting up to speed and ensuring that they are in accordance with the new bylaw, but also in supporting residents about what they can look for. So if there are discrepancies, admittedly, I'm not terribly familiar with all of the different land use bylaws and their requirements for signage. We, of course, would review that as we roll this out, but we would ensure that it's clear. If a lot is located in one district over another, it might look a little bit different per the land use bylaw, but it will still have all of the information and still will be very clearly legible.
Beautiful. Thank you so very much.
Thank
Pleasure.
you, Councillor Blackburn. We'll go to Councillor Stoddard. We can hear you. Now we can't hear you. That looks like a phone or an iPad fell over. You're muted, Iona. There you
Hi,
go.
sorry about that. I may have to leave the room because there's some sawing and hammering going on all of a sudden. But my two questions are, well, actually one, is the 30-minute time limit for them to get to the vehicle and place the ticket. I think the 60 minutes is more appropriate because 30 minutes you can be held up by construction, you could be held up by traffic, and depending on the time of day, there may be more than one employee required. And I think the 60 minutes allows them a little bit of leg room or drive room, for lack of a better word. And I just wondered if staff could comment on that, please.
Mr. Chair, through you to the councillor, I'm actually going to call on my colleague Steve Berkman to speak to the specifics around the timeframe selection, as I don't recall offhand. Steve?
Thank you.
I'm trying here. Okay. First time using Zoom. Sorry about that. So the 30-minute time frame, that came from when we did a jurisdictional scan for preparation for the fine amounts and for creating of the bylaw. So we compared to different jurisdictions and what they were using as response times. That's where we came up with the 30 minutes.
Okay. So is that locked in stone? Are we willing to compromise a little bit? Especially where Halifax being a small city and there's so much construction going on, so much traffic, especially I'm thinking of a restaurant on Quinpool Road where I attended. Didn't get the boot, but a friend of mine did park there and did get a boot. And it's, I don't know, I just think 30 minutes or even 45, maybe meet in the middle would be, would provide a little more time for them to actually get to the location.
So is
Chair,
that an,
sorry.
go ahead, staff, and then I'll follow up.
Okay.
Chair, to you through the councillor, just to address that. So we, whenever possible, conducting our investigations, always hear both sides from complainants and from the accused. So in the instance that you're describing, if the bylaw states 30 minutes and the company was unable to respond within that time frame and can provide evidence that there was a reason, like if they had a flat tire or if there was traffic, we of course would take that into consideration. We just, as Steve mentioned, we just wanted to pick a time frame that was in alignment with other jurisdictions and also being considerate of the person standing at the lot waiting to make a payment. 60 minutes can be a very long time, right? So we want to be mindful of the impact to the customer as well. And I can assure you that with every investigation, we will be reasonable in our determination. If it's 35 minutes, we're not going to issue a SOT for that violation. We would be reasonable in our review.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking in terms of a small business, we want to keep them going. And if they're accumulating a lot of fines, it could mean the difference between keeping the business open and not. So that's just my concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stoddard. We'll go to Councillor Russell.
Thank you very much. I would support the 30-minute time frame because as a consumer, I would not want to be held up too long. And if it requires there to be more of an onus on the company that implemented the boot, I would hope to be able to get on my way sooner. I normally am talking about cash in things like transit, and I'm going to be talking about cash again. But I'd like to start with a little story that I heard. I have no idea where. There was this parking lot, and people could park there for free. And all of a sudden, one day, a gentleman set up a table, and you now had to pay $3 to park there for the day. And so a bunch of cars would come in and park. And the gentleman was very, very good, very polite and courteous, and did his job 7 days a week for 30 years. And then 30 years later, he packed up his table and went away. Turns out the policy of the parking lot had not changed at all. This gentleman just sat down there 8 hours a day for 30 years and collected money from people so that they could park on some lot that he had no relationship with. It was amazing. I'm concerned about that type of thing happening here, where someone comes along and instead of a table, they add a boot, and instead of $3, they charge $60 to remove it. And with it being cash, the potential for fraud here, I see being rife. And so I'm just wondering what would happen in that case. Are they monitored? Would there be some sort of policing? Would there be something after the fact to go along and check for anybody who is doing this? What sort of complaint process would there be? I guess all of that. I'm just, if credit and debit were the only options available, then it would remove or lessen to a great extent that possibility of fraud. But where cash is there and it's a larger amount, anyway, I would appreciate it if you could address that.
Certainly. Mr. Chair, through you to the counselor. Thank you, counselor, for those questions. I have not heard that story, and I certainly hope it didn't occur here in Halifax. So there's a couple of items to unpack there. The first would be fraudulent activity on private property, which is a matter for police. So if someone owns a piece of property, they have certain rights that they can impose any rate they wish for people to park, and if the market facilitates it, people will pay it, right? So the municipality generally is not involved in or at least we haven't been directed to be involved by regional council in terms of regulating the amount charged on private lots and how that occurs, with the exception of residential areas and land use bylaws about how lots can be operated. We regulate that way. But we don't regulate specifically on the activity. So I think the onus in the scenario you described would be on the lot owner actually identifying or being let known of this illegal activity and then alerting police. The reason we offered multiple payment options, firstly, was because the motion asked for it. Second, we had heard instances, and again, not necessarily here, but in other jurisdictions, where companies required cash payment only, and people didn't have the cash on them at the time. So they wanted alternate payment methods, which we introduced here, but also in recognition that some people may park illegally and not have a credit card or a debit card. And so we want to be as equitable as possible in ensuring that if people wanted to pay with cash, they can. The caveat or the safeguard that we believe that we have created in the bylaw is that they must issue a receipt. And the receipt must have their company number on it and a number to contact if someone wants to file an appeal. So if a resident felt that they paid cash and didn't feel great about it, or really questioned as to whether the lot owner knew that this activity was happening on their lot, which again would be very much a stretch, because there would have to be investment of signage, investment of surveilling the lot with no return to the company. And anyway, it's quite complicated. So I really can't envision a scenario rolling out that way. But if it did, they can certainly call 311 and we would investigate and ensure that the person that issued the boot was a registered special constable, that they were registered with a booting company that the municipality was aware of. So there are safeguards outlined in the bylaw and the issuance of a receipt that would address that specific scenario.
Okay, thank you very much.
Go to Councillor Stoddard for her second go around.
Having an issue here. I went to another room. Sorry about that, Mr. Chair. Just in response to Councillor Russell, and you were saying that if you were in a situation where you had a boot and it took more than 30 minutes, you would have a problem. But just keep in mind, you're parking illegally in the first place. So the fact that you're inconvenienced, I don't think should be the responsibility of the person who's giving you the boot. I think you should really consider the fact that you're in an illegal position, and if you have to wait 30 minutes or 35, the very fact that you parked there in the first place should be your first thought, I think. Just my thoughts. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I feel like this is where we would all go for a coffee or a soda pop afterwards and talk it out in a normal time. There's no further speakers on the list, so if someone would care to call the question. Question's been called. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Oh, no, that passes. Thank you. So we'll move on to, thank you staff for that. Thank you, Victoria and Steve. We'll move on to 12.1.4, street art in the right of way. There is no PowerPoint presentation, so if someone would like to put the motion on the floor. Councillor Kent, Deputy Mayor, Deputy Chair, whatever we're doing, Deputy Chair. Would look good on you.
Thank you. I would move that the Transportation Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council, 1, direct the Chief Administrative Officer to continue the use of street art where appropriate as part of the tactical urbanism project, subject to approval of the traffic authority. Number 2, direct the chief administrative officer to continue allowing for art on sidewalks, subject to applicable bylaws, provided appropriate materials are used to ensure adequate slip resistance. And 3, direct the chief administrative officer to continue to only allow the installation of street art placemaking on lower volume roadways, except under extraordinary circumstances as approved by the engineer, as outlined in the discussion section of this report. So moved.
Moved by Councillor Kent.
If I may,
I need a seconder on the motion.
I think that's what he was doing, wasn't it?
No,
Are you
I think
seconding that, Paul? No?
I see some great resistance to that. Councillor
I'll,
Scott,
I'll second that.
for the sake of discussion, thank you, sir. Councillor Kent on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to support it. I appreciate the whole notion of this. I do have a question in relation to, we're doing it now. Why is it like that ability ran out of time? Did it kind of expire? Why is it here again if we're already doing it? What's different here?
We have Tasso Koutrelakis and Roddy McIntyre here to illuminate us. That's some nice feedback there. What do you need
just
to
hold on
mute
there.
one of your computers? Let's give it a try, Tasso. Nope.
Are you good? Can you hear me?
No. Are you both logged in right now? In the same room?
Can you hear me, Councillor?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. Sorry for the feedback.
It's all right.
Mr. Chair, Tasso Koutrelakis, Director of Traffic Management, through you to the Councillor. I guess I am just seeking a little bit more clarification, Councillor, with respect to, or Deputy Chair, with respect to the question. We're here because the motion was made back on September 26, 2019 to report on various elements of roadway art.
You're muted, Becky. Sorry.
Thank you. I think where I got thrown off was that the first motion is to direct the administrative officer to continue to use the use of street art where appropriate. So I don't know, from that, I guess I read that it had finished or stopped or was about to, that we needed to reaffirm that it was going to continue. Just.
Yes, yes, through you to Mr. Chair, through you to the Councillor. Yes, there is a tactical urbanism. Sorry, there is a artwork, placemaking artwork guidelines in place that is being led by Parks and Recreation, and to address the particular motion that speaks to all these other types, different types of artwork within the right of way. We just wanted to highlight the fact that this current guideline currently exists, and the fact that we want to continue to do it.
Okay, all right, that's easy to support. Thank you.
We'll go to Councillor Russell.
Thank you very much. I also sit on the Advisory Committee for Accessibility, and one of the comments on that committee was that some of the patterned uses within the crosswalks or whatnot are very difficult for people with lower vision to be able to navigate. And I see that accessibility has been addressed in the report once under the artistic crosswalk treatments and 3D crosswalks. I'm wondering how much weight it was given in the development of this report, and how much we do that has taken accessibility into consideration or has been run through any accessibility advisor.
Mr. Chair, through you to the Councillor, that is a very good question, and that is actually our primary reason why we do not want to expand what we currently have. There is great concern amongst road safety professionals across North America with the introduction of artwork within the right of way that is non-standard. Okay, and to the point where in the U.S. there is a study being conducted right now, led by the Federal Highways Administration, which is the federal transportation body in the U.S., and they have some significant legislative clout, meaning that, you know, any direction comes out of the FHWA, the states have to follow. Otherwise, they don't receive federal funding for the infrastructure projects. So it's quite heavy-handed. So anyway, there's a project in the States going on right now with respect to artwork, and specifically artwork within crosswalks. Similarly, in Canada, similar concerns from road safety professionals have been expressed, to the point where we're about to kick off a similar project in Canada to look at the same thing. Just so happens my involvement in TAC, I sit on the steering committee. HRM was a contributing partner to this project. And the RFP is about to be kicked off next month. One of the things that we did highlight in that RFP is what kind of impact does it have on those pedestrians specifically with low vision, because of the confusion. But it goes much further to that, whereby, you know, art by its very nature is meant to be, you know, draw your attention to the art. Okay, and so, you know, and the concern is amongst road safety professionals is that, you know, for all road users, we want them focused on the task at hand, i.e., how do you navigate the roadways, whether you're walking across the street, whether you're traveling on the road by vehicle or bike, etc. And so so in our world, our first line of defense is how do we minimize distraction of all road users, and that goes to when we do road safety audits. Minimize sign clutter, because studies show drivers can comprehend only so much information. Meanwhile, we want pedestrians before they cross the street to look both ways to see how, you know, to make sure that it's safe before they cross the street, and so on and so forth. So you're absolutely right. With respect to this report itself, yes, I mean, we do not officially consult with the accessibility community, but we're well aware of the accessibility concerns at national level.
I appreciate that. No, I think that has answered it. I'm not sure that I can support the patterned or within the right of way, and I'm just wondering how that could be voted on separately. I guess where the individual portions of the motion combine it all together. If I were to,
if I may, Councillor Russell, perhaps an amendment to direct the Chief Administrative Officer to ensure that the accessibility staff and the possibly the advisory committee are consulted on designs that, using the language you were just saying about the geometric designs or the repeating designs you're worried about.
That would be fantastic. Yes, that amendment. I would like to.
The one I didn't even finish saying.
The one you didn't even finish saying. Yep, that.
Lawyers love it when you do that.
So it's an add-on as opposed to changing something. It's an add-on, which is still amended.
Yeah,
that's right. Yep. So I guess it would be a point number 4, where we direct the CAO or the traffic authority to consult with the accessibility staff or the accessibility advisory committee on proposed geometric street designs.
I would add the words
art.
Street art as appropriate, right? Because some of them might be quite small or off the road, and it's not required. Does the clerk feel like they captured sufficient words there that we can see it in the chat? We have an amendment. Well, first we have an amendment on the floor, possibly once it's typed out. Does anyone want to second that?
Can I see? I'll see it. I'd like to see what it is before I second it.
She likes to know what she's buying before she puts her cash on the table. I think I can respect that.
Just for clarification, may I ask Councillor Russell a question on it?
Well, let's continue with the discussion on the amendment we probably have on the floor. And Andrea or Jill can let us know if they've been able to capture that maybe before we go on. Is that if you're working on it, that's fine.
So is that a yes to
Chair,
my?
I'm just working on it. I'll be inserting it in the chat shortly.
Perfect. All right. So fire away there, Councillor Kent.
Okay, so Councillor Russell, just to be clear, give me some examples of the kinds of patterns that you're that we're hearing concerns on, that you're kind of envisioning that would be problematic.
Geometric shadings that would cause someone with low vision to not be able to delineate where the edges of a crosswalk are, for example.
Okay.
If there is something that that makes that non-standard, when you're walking with a cane, you can't feel, of course, the edges. And if you are,
and that's the 3D element. Is that
a portion of it is the 3D element? Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And do we have very many of those out there?
At this point, I don't believe we have any. I think there was one. It was recognized to be non-standard, and we went and painted over it. But I
see
stand to be corrected.
the amendment has both dropped and Mr. Kutralakis has popped back in. So the amendment, I'll read it. That motion be amended to include section 4 to direct the CAO to consult with Transportation Standing Committee. Note that would be to consult with accessibility staff and the Accessibility Transportation Committee regarding insertion of geometric pattern street art in the right of way. And then I would add, if appropriate, when appropriate. We'll go to Mr. Kutralakis while we have that amendment amended there.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Now that I've heard the discussion a little bit more with respect to Councillor Russell's concerns, with respect to 3D crosswalks, that is entirely within the realm of the traffic authority, meaning that anything to detract from the official marking, we would not approve. And Councillor Russell is aware of he mentioned the fact that there was an example of this that happened in Dartmouth. I believe it was in 2019. Which once we became aware of it, we immediately ordered, this happened without a approval, and we ordered immediate approval of that marking. With respect to the rainbow markings that we currently have in certain areas of the municipality, at the time, Mr. Swaniga was the traffic authority, and through council, he indicated that he would allow these markings to be placed as long as we would follow a particular design as to not detract from the crosswalk markings themselves. So that's why at that time those markings were allowed to be painted, and the program continues to this day. But with respect to doing something that would alter the official regulatory markings, that is well within the traffic authority's purview, and come Monday or next council meeting, should Brad be approved as a traffic authority, that would be his obviously decision to decide. But as it stands right now, that's a traffic authority decision.
Okay, Councillor Russell.
Thank you. I'm not looking to usurp the authority from the traffic authority. I was simply looking to make sure that the traffic authority had done the right consulting.
Okay. I think it's still well meant for even if it's the intersection of Black Street or whatever in the far north end to make sure that it's accessible. I've heard those too. We'll move to Councillor Kent. You're muted, Becky.
So we still don't have actual motion on the floor, which I'm still unsure whether or not I would actually second. I just need clarification from Councillor Russell, having heard that explanation, of which I feel good about. Are you still putting that motion on the floor?
Absolutely.
How about you read the
amendment.
motion that you're putting on the floor from the chat there so that it's all clear and tickety-boo, and we'll see if anybody seconds it.
Sure. I move I move an amendment to include section 4 to direct the chief administrative officer to consult with the accessibility staff and the accessibility advisory committee regarding the assertion of geometric patterned street art in the right of way where appropriate.
Moved by Councillor Russell. Is there a seconder for that motion?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair, but I do have another question related to that.
Anything further from you, Councillor Russell?
Not yet.
It's one of those days, isn't it? We'll go to Councillor Kent.
So my question now is to Tasso. So it's well within your authority now. Would this measure, which is to direct the chief administrative officer to consult with the accessibility staff and the accessibility advisory committee, let's say he gets some feedback that should be considered. Do you have, does the traffic authority have the ability to even to take all of that into consideration if you're, because from what I can tell, it's fairly tight about what you can approve and what you can't based on federal regulations?
Mr. Chair, through you to the councillor. Well, and part of the pun, but I think we're kind of blurring the lines between two authorities of the traffic authority and the municipal engineer. So the other aspect, I think, with Councillor Russell, what he's referring to is artwork in general. So, for example, the neighborhood placemaking program that currently is in flight and managed by Parks and Rec, the engineer does review any proposals, or his delegated person reviews any proposals that are brought forward by the community for this artwork within local residential streets. So from that perspective, it would be then, my assumption would be that as part of that process, when Parks and Rec engages the municipal engineer for his or her approval, then there'd be another layer of referring this artwork to the accessibility committee to say, hey, are you okay with this? So there is two different levels of authorities here with respect to the traffic authority and the engineer authority.
Okay, I think I'm still confused. I'm gonna hope that somebody else
It's not
says the
easy,
question
Councillor.
helps clarify it, because I guess what is am I hearing this right? That the traffic authority ultimately would get a request for this after it's gone through the, whatever you called it, which is TBW. They would have vetted it, and then they make a request to the traffic authority for final approval?
So with respect to the placemaking projects that are being led by Parks and Rec, there is an online application form. Now, that particular program was paused for a few years because of COVID, but there's an online application process that there are certain criteria that has to be met. And then what Parks and Rec staff would do would circulate that internally, including the engineers, the municipal engineer, for approval. Okay, and early on when it was first rolled out, I believe the first location was in North and Halifax, if I recall correctly. There was a lot of rigor around, okay, how big the artwork should be within an intersection, how far away it should be from the curb, slip resistance, extremely important, extremely concerning. So what type of materials to be used, what kind of additives could be used to provide friction for vehicles, all kinds of technical details that go into that. So for that particular program, Parks and Rec leads it, and they send it to staff, and then at the end, even like my staff, i.e. the traffic authority, will do a quick look to make sure if we don't have any concerns with respect to interference with official devices. Okay, so there's kind of a bit of a checkoff list that the Parks and Recs would follow to get final approval.
So the item that Councillor Russell used as an example, which was crosswalks, the shading, for example, that decision to proceed with that one or several like that, would that initiate through the traffic authority? Would it initiate through TPW first, then come to traffic authority?
Well, the traffic authority is part of TPW, so it's
I know, but it's
one of the same. But ultimate any marking that would potentially interfere with a regulatory marking or sign, et cetera, whatever, it needs to be approved by the traffic authority. So in the case of the 3D crosswalk example that Councillor Russell used, that is well within the realm of the traffic authority to act upon. Okay.
Okay. What I'm getting at, so just so I can get clarification, is I'm trying to get at, is the step that's in this motion something that will have impact before it gets painted on the road? And is it a reasonable step? We want to validate that we are not doing things that are going to cause difficulty, challenges, or potentially unsafe conditions before we actually take the action to paint these crosswalks a certain way. And is this step then, is it going to be useful, or is it just another piece that may not be fruitful in the end? Does it have the capacity to be influenced through this motion? If it does, I'm all for it. If it's just another step that slows down the decision and it can't go forward and the decision is fully within the traffic authority, we have to trust in that traffic authority, right? But if there's an influence beforehand, please somebody save me from myself.
I think, if I may, and Tasso, tell me if I'm wrong, I think there are two different levels on this. One is it allowed in the road, yes or no, from a traffic perspective, from a traffic authority perspective? And then once, if it is allowed, is it appropriately accessible? So I think those are the two things, but I don't think they're the same thing.
Mr. Chair, I think Colin would like to chime in.
Sure.
There we go. Oh, I can't see myself. Can you hear me?
We can hear your voice.
There we go. Okay, you can. Oh, now you can see me. So legal services here. I was going to say basically the same thing you just said, Councillor Mason. I think perhaps some clarity in this motion, if it was started with subject to the satisfaction of the traffic authority with respect to the legality of a proposed installation, that it would then also have to be reviewed by next step, the Accessibility Advisory Committee. Like you said, there are two steps. Traffic authority needs to be confident that the proposed installation is legal. It doesn't make sense to have that go elsewhere and for debate before it even is determined if it's allowable.
That's helpful.
Sure, we could. So Becky, would you like to make a friendly amendment?
Yes, I would, Mr. Chair. I'd like to put in what he said.
So that it subject to
Subject to an approval of the traffic authority.
Consult with accessible staff. Councillor Russell, is that satisfactory?
I just want to make sure that that changing it from a potentially concurrent process to a consecutive process will not slow anything down.
There's never a guarantee of that, Paul.
You want more due diligence on this, but you don't want it to slow down.
Don't want it to slow down.
I don't know what to say to you at this point, but we've had a lot of going back and forth on this. So is that acceptable?
I'm good with
or
it.
not?
I'm good with it. Yes.
You're good with it? All right. It's been amended. There's no further speakers on the amendment. Would we care to call question on the amendment? Question's been called. All those in favor on the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. Next on the list, I believe, is Councillor Austin, who has not actually signed in, but he's back. So I assume you're here to You had some questions about this.
I am. It's a bit of a juggle, rush into the school and back. Yeah, so this was originally my motion back when I was on Transportation Standing Committee, and it turned into a bit of an omnibus motion because I'd had the 3D crosswalk flap here in Dartmouth, and so it was one part of the motion was to go take a look at that. And then there was some kind of ongoing irritants in terms of, where requests mainly in my district, it had been coming from the Downtown Dartmouth Business Commission wanting to do more art out there, but constantly getting a no back from the traffic authority, whether it was sidewalk or whether it was road. And so this was me just kind of gathering up all my public street art irritants into one motion and tackling them all at once. I'm pretty happy with what the report says. I get where folks are coming from on the 3D crosswalks. I am a little leery of banking too much on the federal highway study in the States, just given the track record of the engineering profession, principally at upper level governments over the many years. I mean, I'd be more keen on, well, what does somebody like your NACTO have to say about it? But I generally get where you folks are coming from, and I'm okay with this. The street art piece, good to see the tactical urbanism. That to me is already it wasn't when I made the motion, because there had been asked to do it on the Ochterlony and Wentworth intersection in downtown Dartmouth. But with the Spring Garden one, I feel like that part of the motion's really covered off now. So then it leaves for me, the only thing that I have some question on that I'm not entirely satisfied with is the stipulation to carry on limiting the use of public art on higher volume streets, because I think there's a bit of a continuum here. On a higher volume street, maybe that's not the great place to paint the Mona Lisa down there on the intersection. However, I mean, in between Mona Lisa and just any old paving marking is a whole spectrum. I think you could do things with pretty simple stuff with stencils that would literally just be put the thing down, paint, remove, right? So the concern about the wear and tear on it then becomes kind of an irrelevancy to me. So the Downtown Dartmouth Business Commission would love to do stuff on Portland Street. It is a pedestrian-oriented street. If you're talking our integrated mobility language, is a street or is it a place? What's the crossover between the two? That is most definitely a place. It's where we talk about pedestrian priority. So I'm wondering, the report talks about continuing those prohibitions. Is there any flexibility there? Because I mean, in the past, it's always been, well, you got over 2,500 vehicles, so sorry, you can't have any art.
We'll turn that over to staff. I think that would be a question for Tasso, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the councillor, and just for clarification, previous request not to do the artwork fell to the engineer, not the traffic authority. And the basis for that is with respect to the fact that the tactical, I apologize, the placemaking program is primarily a residential program that there's a whole community build up, participation, execution, etc. But with respect to this, I mean, ultimately, we would review any staff would review any request for this type of artwork. And really, the way it's written, ultimately, the municipal engineer would make that decision as far as whether that would be appropriate at a particular location, depending the type of artwork it is. But I guess I'm going back to the fact that, and we heard from councillors here in this call today when we were speaking about the traffic authority item. It's clearly everybody's concerned with road safety, right? And we as road safety professionals, that is our number one concern, right? And what do we do to improve road safety? And so it's a balance, and it's how far do you swing the pendulum to allow what type of art in what location without impacting safety. And then I don't want to repeat myself how throughout North America we're having these discussions about the impact to, road safety, including what Councillor Russell mentioned as far as, pedestrians with low visions trying to navigate the street, impact to connected and automated vehicles, which it's closer than you think. I mean, there's real concern amongst practitioners how we handle the safety implications around connected and automated vehicles. So those are the type of things that have to be weighed against one another to determine what would be appropriate at what location. But ultimately, that decision would reside with a municipal engineer. And we've made few exceptions, albeit there's others think that we should be making more exceptions out there. But at the end of the day, we can review these requests as they come in.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, I don't know if I have time, but is there anything that would formally prevent then, it doesn't sound like there is, it sounds like it's an engineer's discretion sort of issue that would prevent, the use, considering public art on main streets? Or do we need a supplemental report asking for, well, what would a program look like that would allow these sorts of public art in places that are pedestrian priority, in the sorts of places that the IMP would say this is a place, not just a street, right? In terms of that categorization, your Spring Garden roads, your Portland Street, these sorts of things. Or like, do we need a report on this, or is it enough that we have engineers' discretion?
Mr. Chair, through to the councillor, I would suggest that it would be the engineer's discretion, councillor. I mean, every situation, to your point, is somewhat unique. So we would have to look at it on an individual basis to see what would be appropriate for a particular location. So I don't know how you would put guidelines around that piece. I think it would be quite difficult and, quite frankly, quite onerous to come up with more guidelines to do that. So I think as these things come in, we as staff will review and make recommendations.
Okay, if I can just close, Mr. Chair, I would say if we're at a place where we can get past the, well, you have more than 2,500 vehicles, it's automatically no, which was, how it kind of was done in the past, and we can have a little bit more discretion, then I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Councillor Austin. So I'll ask my question from the chair. I think has basically been answered. We had some concerns from a couple of bids about the way number 3 is worded, where it says only allow installation of street art placemaking on low volume roadways. And I just want to confirm with Tasso, what I'm hearing is you're referring to the placemaking program, but that if there's a tactical install or public art or banners on light posts or any of that stuff, none of that is. These are all different things, I think, is what I gathered from your answer to an earlier question, because the concern was that there are places where public art or a placemaking equivalent may go in on a high volume roadway. The one that came to mind was Queen Street, where we're about to do some painting behind those barricades that are in for the tactical install that we've partnered with Spring Garden Road. So it won't be in the travel way, but it will be on the roadway. So will things like that still be allowed? It's the question for staff.
Mr. Chair, the short answer is yes. So we've been working closely with our colleagues in planning and development to look at these tactical urbanism projects. And going back to what I said earlier, we're working with them to make sure that anything that is introduced within the right of way does not interfere with the official traffic markings, and it actually provides a better place. I mean, the design that they came up with for that Artillery Place, Queen Street, it's a great design. It's going to help tighten up that intersection, improve road safety. In order to help delineate that intersection, we were more than happy to work with them to come up with the appropriate artwork for that location.
Perfect, thank you. Are there any further questions? Seeing none, would someone care to call the question? Question's been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much for that. We'll move to 12.2, active Transportation Advisory Committee, short-term safety measures requested on Joseph Howe Drive and Chain of Lakes Trail. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll put the motion on the floor that the Transportation Standing Committee, one, request the designer to present the Active Transportation Advisory Committee when there is a design available regarding the intersection where Joseph Howe Drive and Chain Lakes Trail meet, and two, urgently request a staff report on an implementation of short-term safety measures for active transportation until the final project is implemented, and three, the correspondence be emailed to the project designer and the Transportation Standing Committee. So moved.
Moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Stoddard. Councillor Kent.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I am on the Active Transportation Advisory Committee. I don't think I was there for this particular motion, but I think that it's in relation to some of the concerns that the advisory staff have on it. It might be worthwhile having David McIsaac, if he's here, although he's not doing a presentation, perhaps bring us up to speed on some of the rationale behind the request, so council or the committee can understand what's forward. But I think they're seeing this as a relatively urgent scenario and a need for some safety measures.
Well, and Dave, if you're still on the line, I guess the question for me as well along those lines is it's unusual to urgently request a staff report. So, and that makes me uncomfortable. So I'm wondering if you could comment on the nature of the request and whether or not we should do that. I don't have a problem with the request, but that is unusual.
Unusual, yeah.
Mr. Chair, David McIsaac, Program Manager for Active Transportation. Can you all see me, hear me?
Yep.
Great. Yeah, so just thinking back to the discussion at the committee, I think that this was brought forward. I think it might have been Councillor Morse, a constituent, had raised it with her. A lot of folks on the committee knew the intersection and saw some issues there. And you know, we are designing, we're in the preliminary design phase right now for making some changes there to, number one, have a better connection from the active transportation facility that we're building on Bears Road to connect it to Chain of Lakes Trail to kind of, you know, that AAA all ages and abilities connection between communities on the peninsula and the Western Mainland and beyond. So I guess in relation to the motion, I've already followed up with our design engineer, and he and I are going to have a presentation that might even be the next Active Transportation Advisory Committee meeting to kind of take them through what we're looking at the intersection, which includes, you know, measures to improve the safety there, reduce crossing distances for pedestrians, tighten it up as much as we can. It's, you know, it's a challenging area. You know, it's a point at which, you know, the provincial highway system joins the municipal street system. We've got the Chain of Lakes Trail crossing there. So there's a lot going on, but I think that, you know, what I see coming together in the design will make some significant improvements. I think in the meantime, our traffic group, I think it might have even been TASO, went out and had a look and did identify 2 or 3 kind of short-term safety improvements that we could make there. I think getting some better paint on the crosswalk, and I think there were some signage changes that he was proposing. So really, I mean, that's the status of it. It's definitely a project that we have identified as needing improvement. And, you know, depending on how the design process goes, we would hopefully be in position to actually construct that next year. I'll also add, you know, there's a provincial, it's where the provincial highway system meets the municipal system. And we've had some discussions with the province already, and, you know, they are supportive of making some changes there. They'll have to look at the design and that kind of thing, but we're coordinating with them at this point as well. So that's more or less the status.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. McIsaac. So the policy wonk, parliamentary, you know, young parliamentarian in me would request that someone on the committee amend out urgent and also implementation of, because of course the Transportation Committee can't order staff to implement anything. It would have to go to regional council if it wasn't something they did as a operational issue. So looking for an amendment, because technically I think it's out of order actually. So let's just do that.
I'm Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could speak to it.
Yes.
Yeah, so I kind of feel the same way as you. Again, I wasn't there. So I'm certainly open to taking out the number 2 completely. Frankly, I'm a little unsure too, as well as if we're in order asking that a request of the designer. I assume the designer is within house.
Yep. I see Dave nodding.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So
more properly,
that,
it should read request staff present to the Active Transportation Committee.
Yeah. So staff, and it sounds like you're going to go that route anyway. Sounds like that's coming. So I'm certainly comfortable with the first one, just so that we have it on record for the Active Transportation Advisory Committee, assuming we're not outside of the mandate of the Active Transportation Advisory. Is it typical for stuff to come back up?
Not like this.
No, that's
stuff does come back up, but
I think I've had that conversation in that committee. I also, the correspondence be emailed to the project designer. I feel like that is them. Number 3 is almost directive, as if there is a role in a mandate for the advisory committee to ask for us, the staff, to be emailed about this correspondence. That wouldn't that be a normal routine part of
I don't see it being
committee?
I don't see it being against the rules. I see it as being kind of a belt and suspenders thing. Normally incoming communication would be shared with staff, but they've asked to make sure.
That's what I feel like. Like, to me, that is kind of redundant. So I feel like we should just leave 1 on the table, request that staff present to the Active Transportation Advisory Committee when there is a design available regarding the intersection where Joseph Howe Drive and Chain Link Trails meet.
So we have a amendment to change it to request staff present and to strike 2 and 3. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councillor Russell. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Carries unanimously. And now back on the main motion. Is there any further discussion on the motion as amended? Seeing none, question's been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. McIsaac. Move on to 12.3, members of the Transportation Standing Committee. There are none. There are no motions. There is no in camera. There are no added items. Are there any notices of motion from the committee? Going once, going twice. And now public participation. We barely managed to squeeze it in that we have 20 minutes for 4 presentations. So any member of the public who is registered with the clerk's office for public participation has up to 5 minutes to speak. When a person finishes speaking, members of the standing committee are able to ask questions of clarification. As a reminder, these have to be questions of clarification about what was presented. No action may be taken by the standing committee this afternoon. If standing committee members wish to bring a motion to ask or report, they are asked to bring the motion with due notice to the next meeting of standing committee. So when I call your name, I'll ask you to unmute your mic, and if you're on Zoom, you turn on your camera and you may start speaking. I'll just go through who the 4 are in the order I'll be asking them. The first is Daniel Watson, and then the second is Brandon Ellis, then the third is Darcy Garrison, and then the 4th is Sue Utek. So we're going to start with Daniel Watson. Clerk, is Daniel on the line after 2.5 hours?
Yes, Mr. Chair, he's present.
Perfect. There he is. All right, Daniel, you have 5 minutes starting now.
Hi, Mr. Chair and committee.
Hey, yeah, we can hear you. You're a little choppy.
Little choppy. Is that better?
It works. Go ahead.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, hello, Mr. Chair and the committee. I just wanted to speak about some points that I had wanted to speak to before. you guys had voted on the proposed bylaw. So I sent a document out late last night, well, before 4:30, but that outlined our analysis and what we think should come out of this bylaw. So I'm just going to drill down on a couple points. This bylaw, my biggest pain point with it is the price of $60. That's a 40% reduction in what we charge right now. And a reduction of that magnitude truly makes it impossible to provide a living wage for my employees, as well as operate the business. I'm not speaking hyperbole. The business will close if we are forced to take a 40% reduction. So I just want to get that clear, that in my document that I sent everybody, I outline that we pay our staff a living wage and we provide a service that is very high, includes citation software, visitor parking software, and body cameras and call centers and insurance and an office downtown and things like that. So I was hoping to get it in front of this so that you could make an amendment to the price cap of $60. It takes a jurisdictional scan of across the country, but these bylaws that it's scanning are from the 90s, 2000s, and they don't take into account pricing in other parts of the Maritimes. So I would ask, I don't know if it's possible, but if there could be an amendment or to ask me some questions about that pricing. I'm not sure if that's a matter or not, but and my other part is in my recommendations, I mentioned the 30 minutes. Our internal goal is to be 20 minutes to respond to calls. Our concern is that on the 10% or 15% that go further than 30 minutes in our response time due to traffic, due to being held up at a site, due to anything like that, that will be fined. And then there'll be an extra burden put on us to then go back and forth with the bylaw enforcement to prove these claims and things like that. I'm okay with signage. I'm okay with registering. I'm okay with uniforms. We meet all this stuff. When we started the business in 2013, we had legal recommendations on how to have signage, what our pricing should be, and where it should be placed. There's nothing in this bylaw that talks about where the sign should be placed. On this bylaw right now, I could place the sign in the back of the property where no one could see it. Our internal standards are we place the sign at the front of the property so everyone can see it. And then I'd finally like to one other point about the price. Changing 75 of my signs, even if I could afford at $60 to operate the business, changing my signage alone would be an extreme burden right after COVID. I'm a parking company, so you can understand that my business has been demolished. So I just ask you to think about my employees and our futures. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. We really appreciate you being here today and sticking it out to the end. And I just want to be clear to you and Mr. Ellis that there are this is not the end of the discussion, right? That as I suggested, I think a public hearing would be appropriate, and there is an opportunity at first reading at council for an amendment. So this is not done. Pardon me. So thank you very much for that. There's a question from Councillor Kent with clarification.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. That's one of the benefits of being able to come here is that it doesn't end here. Usually most often has to go to council. So you talk about your business. Can you give me some examples of where you're in operation so I can have a context to what it is you're delivering? Can you just expand on that so I can understand it?
Yeah, so our business operates on private parking lots throughout HRM, and it also operates on commercial parking lots that have residential and businesses. So standalone parking lots for pay and display, we provide enforcement for that, and then enforcement for residential properties. So in my notes, we work with some of the biggest developers in the city. So WM Fairs, the Bank Group, Page Property, Page Property, which is the Ramius. We provide this service to their residential and commercial properties. So we operate from downtown all the way out to Kearney Lake right now. And we're getting more and more requests for that Larry UTech area to help with visitor parking situations by utilizing our software and our patrol service to make it fair for everyone to utilize visitor parking. So sometimes we can be stuck out there, and again, it's a 10 or 15% chance if you're concerned about the time, 10-15% of the time we're over that 30 minutes. But we have an internal rule that if we're over an hour, which thankfully has only happened twice since 2013, that we remove the boot for free. So I think that's where you're getting at, is time for me to move around. Is that what you're
muted, Becky.
Thanks. I'm also concerned about what you put forward around the decrease in what you're charging now. That's a significant impact, and that matters to me. So the second part of my question is two parts. Is this sort of an industry standard across other jurisdictions that this generally is a rate that's being used? And is this also, are there other agencies like yours out in HRM that are doing the same, that this same kind of impact could have?
So in the jurisdictions that are cited in the report, I'm unable to find, and my staff are unable to find any booting operation that operates anymore. These bylaws, when they were put in place a long time ago, I believe that cap is what ended those businesses. It's simply not feasible to run at that price. As far as what everyone else is doing, there is another booting company in the city. However, I don't believe they're in operation. They were charging $135. In Fredericton, there is a company operating at $135. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, there is a company that's operating at $135. So our price at $100, and I'll give you some context. In 2013, we started at $80. And in 2018, we made our one and only increase from 80 to 100. Because we brought in citation software, and I'm not sure if Victoria's on the line or if any of you know, but citation software like the city has is extraordinarily expensive. And to maintain that and to keep that up. So when we brought in visitor parking software that impacts thousands of residents positively, and the other technology that we brought into place, we had to put our price up in 2018 from 80 to 100. And we've been operating at that point throughout this pandemic. We've been able to keep staff on, through this entire pandemic, even though there's simply there's nothing to enforce. But we've been able to keep these jobs based on how we've made the company.
Thank you, Councillor Kent. Thank you, Dan. There's no further questions for you, so I appreciate you sticking it out and coming out today. We'll move on to Brandon Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you as well, committee members, for having me here today.
All right. Well, Brandon froze and then dropped out of the call, which is, seems to be the way today is going, not just in Bedford, Tim. So how about
I taught him well.
You taught him well. So how about we'll do this? Darcy Garrison. Brendan's back. All right, we're nice people here. We're going to restart your time, and you can let me just hit reset here.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chair.
All right.
Didn't
Just
want to be
go
kicked out
quick, 'cause
before I could-
we're down to our last 9 minutes theoretically. I might need a motion to extend the meeting a bit, but go ahead.
Yes,
Brandon.
I'll be as quick as I can. And I'd just like to first start off by saying that I'm very empathetic towards Dan Watson and his employees. I know how hard they work and I know how good they are of a company. And I'd like to start off my presentation here by asking each counselor to take the time to go out and reach out with them and to have those sit down conversations and understand the model of his business as best you can, because it's very difficult to do in just a few minutes here. That's why so desperately today we wanted to participate before the motion was considered. And there were key parts of that staff report that were left out that Dan had mentioned. And Mr. Chair, as a policy wonk that you are, I'm sure you would appreciate that a proper jurisdictional scan should be done. It says that there's 2 operators within the city. Well, there's only one price listed and they both have different prices. And they didn't include St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador and Fredericton. They only put in significantly lower rates and rates where there's no booting companies that are in practice. But I'm going to get to my actual speech now, and I'm going to go very quickly, Mr. Chair. So my name is Brandon Ellis, and I am the Halifax Regional Manager for a business called Target Park. We currently operate 6 private parking lots within the HRM, and we will be adding 15 more parking lots this year. The parking lots that we manage are primarily REITs. We have close to 2,000 people currently parking with us, and that number is estimated to be close to 8,000 after we add our new properties. There are also 10 businesses that currently operate in our properties and roughly 250 healthcare workers that rely on our lots being functional and in good service, primarily in the downtown of Halifax, which is often a highly transient area. I'm here today to express my significant disappointment in the mobilization bylaw that's been presented and the lack of consultation that really we've had. Not a single one of my clients were consulted as to how this bylaw may impact their business. I was also not consulted myself, and to the best of my knowledge, One Shot's clients also were not consulted. So I don't think that it's just going to impact a niche number of businesses. I think it's going to have severe unintended consequences. So we have worked with One Shot Parking Solutions for close to 8 years now. They're able to provide services in a way that the city cannot. Just this week alone, we've called the city 3 times, updated to 4 today because Dan and company were a little tied up. Last Friday, I called them to have 3 vehicles ticketed at one of our lots, and it took 3 hours to get there. And then they refused the ticket upon arrival, as we did not stand there for half the day waiting for them. The same incident happened on Monday, and on Tuesday morning at 7 a.m., the call center had advised me to call the police to have them ticketed. So as I mentioned, as I'm speaking right now, my colleague has been standing around at Harborview Apartments for close to 4 hours waiting for a city ticket to be written. It was just written a few moments ago, so he can leave now. But this is extraordinarily inefficient and will be the future that parking lot managers will be looking at in the event that we cannot adequately enforce our lots. The current bylaw as it's presented is using a sledgehammer to kill a fly in my analysis. As opposed to working with the industry, the bylaw will decimate our business and the services that we provide to our customers. If we lose the ability to ask One Shot to boot at our locations, our business and the thousands of customers that we serve will be devastated. On April 23rd, I sent a letter to Mayor and Council outlining some of my concerns. Further to this, I sent a letter to HRM staff on May 28th asking about the status of the bylaw coming before committee, and I received no answer. In turn, I was then rejected, and an explanation was given today after I found out that and requested to speak before the vote. To my surprise, Councillor Blackburn, a non-member of this committee and a conflicted party that was previously booted and publicly demanded action, has been granted the opportunity to speak.
Yeah, I'm going to stop you there. She's a member of council and has a statutory legal right to speak. So that's why she spoke. So let's just be clear on that, and you can carry on and skip over that part.
Yeah, my last 2 words are decisions today, and that is the end of her. That's in my sentence.
All right. Furthermore,
thank you for the clarification, by the way, Chair. Furthermore, one of the staff today Steve, had not returned any of my calls, 5 to be exact.
We're at 30 seconds remaining.
Thank you. Okay. I'll go quick. I asked the chair to investigate why staff have been so unresponsive to my requests for more information. My last bit here. After liaising with the staff and counselors throughout the week, I've had a feeling that the vote was going to go the way it was. They all recommended that we speak at council, which is fair, but we could have had far more efficient conversation today if we had a chance to present and answer questions before the vote. I request the councillors of this committee to follow up with myself and Mr. Watson to hear our side. Rigorous debates and disagreements are hallmarks of our society and a good democracy, and I feel that we lost that a bit today. We weren't given the opportunity to exchange ideas. A famous person once said that you may not like this, but you better learn to love it. And that's how I feel that we were treated earlier today. That is all for my testimony, Mr. Chair. I need to now catch my breath.
Testimony. I feel like we're suddenly Congress or something. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question to you is, Brandon, is what date did you say that you sent it to mayor and council something?
I believe it was April. Give me 2 seconds. I'll give you the exact answer, Councillor. It would have been April 23rd.
April 23rd. And I wanted to know if you could resend that to me.
Absolutely.
I would like the opportunity to review that again. And I do want to acknowledge that the concerns around businesses, the impact on businesses is a big priority for me. And so I would appreciate the opportunity in the future to have further conversation. Thank you.
Would love to, Councillor.
I can see that we were all blind copied the letter on April 23rd at 2:16, and it is in my mailbox. So there are no further questions from anyone. So thank you very much, Brandon. I appreciate you coming out today and sticking around. We're going to move on.
If I just may, I'd just like to just very quickly, Mr. Russell, I know you're in beautiful Cape Breton. That's my home community. I hope you're enjoying it. I won't disrupt the call anymore today.
Thank you.
I already expressed my jealousy to Mr. Russell. We need a motion to extend the meeting an extra 15 minutes here. Moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by, Councillor Stoddard, do you have a question? I think you just left the call. You're muted. I'd ask everyone to put it in the chat. I can't keep track of the hands. So, Councillor.
Sorry, it was a last minute thing. I was just going to mention to the gentleman that was on the call that I, as well as Councillor Kent, would like to be involved. So Councillor Kent, maybe when he does reach out, you can let me know. Thank you.
Oh, very good. Okay, so we have a motion to extend the meeting from Councillor Kent.
Seconded
by Councillor Russell. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Next on our list is Darcy Garrison. Darcy is on the phone, so since you're using the telephone instead of Zoom, make sure the webcast or TV broadcast is muted. And once you hear your name announced, please press *6. I feel like that was the instructions for Teams. Let's see how it goes.
It's the same.
The same? Excellent. Well, isn't that magical? So Darcy, if you could press *6, and we'd like to hear if you're there.
Hi, hello, chairperson and councillors.
There you are. You have 5 minutes starting now.
I will try to make this quick. Although, I mean, I work for One Shot Parking. I've worked here for more than 5 years, so it's a bit of a shock to see that it's possible I could lose my employment. And more likely, as I guess time goes on, as this goes through council. I work day to day, actually booting the vehicles, and I think that a point that may be missed during this analysis is that people who are parking on private property, they're coming onto a private lot, and I believe that in regards to like the wait time, I think that of course I try to be there as quickly as possible, because the faster I get there, the less agitated obviously people are because of the inconvenience of being booted, of course. However, there's sometimes where I could be discussing with somebody the reason that they're mobilized, and that may take a few minutes for me to explain that to them and for them to understand that. So by the time I talk to somebody for a few minutes, if I have another call to go to, regardless of what area of town it is, I could show up at a call, be talking with somebody for 10 or 15 minutes, and then once that booting issue is resolved, to go on to the next call. It could take me a few minutes. So by reducing the fee down to $60 and reducing the time down to 30 minutes, it would just make it almost impossible to operate. And I think that another thing that should be considered is the pricing for the comparable things that are done in the industry regarding parking, as in vehicles that are being towed, whether it be from private lots or from the city streets. That price, from what I understand, can range upwards of $200 plus tax to get your vehicle back, and you can only receive your vehicle back within the impound hours of that lot, which in Halifax is approximately 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So we go out and I remove boots all hours of the day, and we try to be there as quickly as possible. So to hold us to that standard, that we're there within a half hour, or we can be fined, which could put a significant impact on the business, I don't think would be fair when you look at what is done directly via the city of Halifax, as well as the inconvenience of having to find a way to get to an impound area, the impound lot, which is in Dartmouth. And I know that a lot of vehicles that are towed, for example, in no parking areas or no stopping area, that you could be parked there legally until 3 p.m. and then at 3:01 p.m. your vehicle, which I've seen this happen before on, for example, Goderson Street, could be towed away at 3:01, and then you're stuck having to go over to Dartmouth and get your vehicle back. I've also seen tow trucks. I've seen a tow truck drop off a vehicle at a parking lot that had a ticket on it, which I assume was towed from another parking lot. So I don't understand how that person could get their vehicle back within that time frame. Even if it was towed directly to the lot, it could take the tow truck operator during rush hour 30 minutes to get to Dartmouth. So I think that expectation is very hard. So I think that although booting, it may seem a bit evident, it may seem like an inconvenience, I would say that most people would vote that it would be more convenient than having your vehicle towed. And even at $100, it is less of a financial impact than having your vehicle towed from a city street or even a private lot, which could cost you upwards of $200 plus the ability to get over there, and also the city ticket that you would incur prior to your vehicle being towed, which is my understanding that would have to happen. So I would just like to make those remarks, and I think that with the price that it is, if it goes down to $60, I would be looking for alternative employment coming out of the middle of a pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, and really appreciate you coming and speaking so clearly today. Darcy, are there any questions for Mr. Garrison? Seeing none, I'm going to let you go. Thank you very much for coming out today. And I have some good news.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
No, absolutely. I have some bad news for the committee, which is Sue Utek, who had previously expressed that she'd like to come, is not on the call today, and that may have been a communication confusion with the office. We may see your next meeting, but I have good news for the community, which is Sue Utek's not here, so we're done. So the date of the next meeting is July 22nd, 2021 at 1 p.m. And I'll take an adjournment. Adjourned
So
by a motion to adjourn by Iona Stoddard Sand first. So we are adjourned. Thank you for a long but a good one. I really appreciate it.